Chapter 218. Lung Xuangshuang had admired His Highness Duke of Qin for a long time. Of course, she had investigated Han Yunqi and knew that Han Yunqi knew how to use poison. However, she never thought that Han Yunqi knew how to use hidden weapons. By the time she reacted, it was already too late. Her right hand suddenly lost strength, and the long sword fell to the ground with a clang. It was obvious that the hidden weapon was poisoned. However, she was still from a family of assassins. She still had the basic qualities to remain calm in the face of danger. She kicked the long sword and held it in her left hand, continuing to stab at Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi, I didn't expect you to be so despicable. Han Yunqi dodged while shooting out needles. She took the opportunity to pull away from Long Xuangshuang and said sarcastically, "You're 10 against 1. Not only are you despicable, but you're also shameless." Cut the crap. Watch this. A numbing sensation spread from her right hand to her entire body. Long Xuangshuang didn't know what kind of poison it was, but her conviction as an assassin kept her going. Even if she was poisoned, she had to get rid of Han Yunqi before she collapsed. The tip of the sword changed directions. Every move was cold and ruthless. The blade stabbed past Han Yunqi's face many times. Just a slight deviation and it almost ruined Han Yunqi's face. Han Yunqi secretly admired Long Xuangshuang's perseverance. She dodged sideways while reminding her, "Fourth young Miss Long, aren't you curious about what kind of poison you've been poisoned with? Hand over the antidote. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead." Long Xuangshuang chased after her relentlessly. If she wasn't afraid of Han Yunqi's hidden weapons and was poisoned, she wouldn't have been entangled with this woman for so long. "Fourth young Miss Long, if you don't stop now, you'll be the one suffering a fate worse than death." Not only was Han Yunqi not afraid, she was even laughing. She rolled on the ground and Long Xuangshuang's sword followed closely behind. She kept stabbing, but she missed by a little each time. But all of a sudden, Han Yunqi stopped and lay on the ground. Long Xuangshuang was stunned for a moment, but she quickly regained her senses and drew her sword. Who knew that at this critical moment, Han Yunqi suddenly shouted, "You've been poisoned with an aphrodisiac." As soon as he said that, Long Xuangshuang's movements stopped abruptly. Even the killers and Long Feiyi who were fighting fiercely around them stopped and looked over. The strange numbness had already spread throughout Long Xuangshuang's entire body. It was teasing every nerve in Long Xuangshuang's body. She had been trying very hard to ignore it and not think too much about what kind of poison it was. She only wanted to subdue Han Yunqi. But who knew that Han Yunqi would shout it out so loudly? Now, it was hard for her to ignore it. After all, she was a woman. Because of Han Yunqi's words, her willpower collapsed by more than half. She immediately felt a surge of heat in her abdomen. There was an indescribable feeling of dissatisfaction. It was so uncomfortable that she wanted to do something. Damn it! Long Xuangshuang forced herself to endure it. The tip of her sword was close to Han Yunqi's neck. She gritted her teeth. "You despicable woman, take out the antidote. Otherwise, I'll immediately disfigure your face." Han Yunqi raised her face and giggled. "Do you believe that you'll be even more despicable than me very soon? Also, other than my antidote, no matter how many men there are, they won't be able to save you." Only a princess consort could say such words. However, not only did Han Yunqi say it, she even said it very loudly. She admitted that she didn't have much self-cultivation, but she had the ability to force all the well-cultivated young ladies to reveal their true colors. Long Xuangshuang's face alternated between red and white. She did not care about her image at all. She was so angry that she was like a shrew. She stomped her feet and scolded, "Han Yunqi, you shameless bitch." The killers at the side could not help but look over again. They had been in the Long family for so long, but this was the first time they saw the fourth miss fly into a rage. It was really unbelievable. A trace of contempt flashed across Long Feiyi's lips. The Long family's young miss cultured manners were only as Han Yunqi allowed Long Xuangshuang to curse and allowed her sword to tremble in front of her eyes. From beginning to end, she maintained a harmless smile. "Fourth Miss Long, don't be agitated. Once you're agitated, the poison will flare up even faster." Long Xuangshuang really wanted to skin Han Yunqi alive. However, she was also afraid. She was afraid that she would really do something unsightly in front of His Highness Duke of Qin. She could only compromise. What do you want in order for you to hand over the antidote? Han Yunqi did not speak. Her gaze drifted to the fierce battle at the side. Lung Shuangshuang naturally understood. Give me the antidote, and I'll have them retreat immediately. Have them retreat immediately. I still have a second condition. Han Yunqi said bluntly. A second condition? This woman was reaching for a yard after taking an inch. Lung Shuangshuang could only submit no matter how sullen she felt. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she gritted her teeth and ordered the top 10 assassins to stop. Who would have thought that even though the top 10 assassins had stopped, Long Fei had no intention of stopping the battle? Unexpectedly, he pulled out a golden whip from his waist. With a sharp whoosh, he said coldly, "You killed this prince's horse. Either leave your lives behind, or this prince will take all 10 of your lives." As soon as he finished speaking, the long whip lashed out viciously. This man was reaching for a yard after taking an inch. Lung Shuangshuang sucked in a breath of cold air. She simply could not believe her ears. However, Han Yunqi smiled even more happily. This was Long Fei's domineering nature. As long as she did not drag him down, it was fine. He did not need her help at all. Long Fei's whip not only lashed out viciously, but he also deliberately aimed it at the assassins furthest away, forcing them to continue fighting. Duke of Qin, don't be too arrogant. If you want to touch any of the brothers, you have to ask if our 10 swords agree. Fourth young miss, forgive us for not being able to comply. The top 10 assassins and 10 sharp swords surrounded them once again. However, the situation this time was completely different from before. Long Fei used a long whip, not a long sword. Every move, every swing, and every retraction, he quickly gained the upper hand among the 10 assassins. His whip was long and flexible, and the tip of the whip was cold and sharp. With a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound, he actually knocked down 2 sharp swords. This time, even Han Yunqi was stunned. Only then did she realize that Long Fei's true ability was actually not swordsmanship, but the whip technique. The golden soft whip hidden at his waist was his most lethal weapon. With his white clothes and golden whip, he moved freely among the 10 assassins. Every swing was luxurious, noble, and domineering. Whether it was Han Yunqi or Long Shuangshuang, they had never seen a man who could fight a battle so beautifully and luxuriously. Of course, the top 10 assassins were the most shocked. They had already secretly admired Long Fei's swordsmanship, but now they realized that his most powerful skill was not swordsmanship, but something else. This time, it was hard to stop halfway. They had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue fighting. In just a short while, another 2 long swords were knocked down, and the tip of the whip was raised, directly injuring an assassin's face. Han Yunqi was fascinated, but Long Shuangshuang couldn't stand it anymore. Han Yunqi, where's the antidote? It was Long Fei who didn't want to fight, so she couldn't do anything about it. Han Yunqi stared at Long Fei's figure without blinking and asked casually, "Where's Mother Su?" Long Fei received news that this carriage was supposed to pick up Mother Su. If Lung Shuangshuang was here, then where was Mother Su? Seeing Han Yunqi's indifferent attitude, Lung Shuangshuang was unable to restrain her anger. "I don't know what Mother Su or Motherly. That person in the palace only told me that if I took this carriage out of the city, the Duke of Qin would chase after me. Han Yunqi, don't go back on your words. Where's the antidote?" No matter how good her willpower was, she couldn't resist the effects of the drug. At this time, she had already unconsciously rolled up her sleeves. She felt so uncomfortable. Han Yunqi wasn't anxious with her. She smiled and said, "When the Duke of Qin is done, I will definitely give you the antidote. Don't worry, the drug won't take effect so quickly." She thought that she wasn't strong enough to be Long Fei's solid backing, but at least she could let him have no worries. You. Lung Shuangshuang was so angry that she almost vomited blood. "Han Yunqi, who do you think I am? My Long family has always kept their word. Give me the antidote. If I say I won't hurt you, then I won't hurt you." Han Yunqi was in a good mood. She leisurely glanced over. "In any case, I don't believe you." Lung Shuangshuang was so angry that she wanted to commit suicide. However, at this time, a squeaking sound similar to that of a mouse suddenly came from the surroundings. Very quickly, from the darkness in all directions, pairs of scarlet eyes appeared. Han Yunqi suddenly stood up. What are those things? The moment she said that, in an instant, countless huge bats flew out from all directions. They ignored everyone else present and actually rushed towards Han Yunqi alone. These beasts were clearly being controlled by someone's mistress to attack her. What kind of person did she offend? Han Yunqi turned to escape, but she didn't dare to run too far. She continuously shot out gold needles to kill the huge bats. However, the number of huge bats was really too big. There were at least a few hundred of them, and her pear blossom teardrop rain could only shoot out 33 gold needles at one time. Of all the martial arts in the world, only speed was invincible, and all kinds of attacks in the world were won by quantity. In just a short while, a few scratches appeared on the back of Han Yunqi's hand. Just when Han Yunqi was overwhelmed by the attacks, Long Feiyi suddenly lashed out with his whip, sweeping down a large number of huge bats for her. The people of Liberty City also want a share of the loot? Long Feiyi was as cold as ice. With a flash, he broke through the encirclement of the killers and landed beside Han Yunqi. With a cool wave of his hand, more than half of the huge bats retreated. Although these huge bats were beasts, they also understood human nature. They seemed to have been intimidated by Long Feiyi's powerful aura. They hovered around the surroundings, not daring to move forward. And right at this time, a man in white clothes flew out from the darkness. He looked elegant and noble, extraordinarily handsome, like a scholar. The huge bats hovered around him. He opened his folding fan, and a huge bat landed gracefully on his folding fan like a butterfly. Such an evil and filthy creature had been trained to be so obedient. This scholar seemed to be a combination of evil and righteousness. This person was none other than the famous eldest young master of Liberty City, Qi Yaotian. Chapter 219. Besieged by two cities, the situation was very unfavorable to Long Feiyi's group. Lung Shuang was a smart person. Even if the City of Daughters withdrew and watched from the sidelines, Long Feiyi might not be able to take Han Yunqi into consideration. How could Han Yunqi's little tricks deal with the giant bats? She resisted the heat in her body and didn't immediately state her position. Instead, she waited silently for Han Yunqi to give her the antidote of her own accord and beg her for help. The City of Daughters and Carefree City had never cooperated before. Moreover, she'd already made it very clear that although the City of Daughters had accepted the astronomical bounty, their main goal was to rope in Long Feiyi. As long as Long Feiyi nodded, the City of Daughters would be willing to compensate that person in Tianing Palace with double the price. If Han Yunqi had any brains, she should know what to do. With her and the 10 assassins' help, it would be easy to beat back Qi Yaotian. Seeing that Long Shuang wasn't speaking, Qi Yaotian didn't ask any more questions. He politely cupped his hands and bowed to Long Feiyi. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, I've offended you." But before he could make a move, Long Feiyi moved first. He grabbed Han Yunqi with one hand and held a whip with the other. Powerful internal energy flowed into the whip, causing it to be as sharp as a sword's wind blade. Like a hot knife through butter, it shot towards Qi Yaotian. Qi Yaotian wasn't easy to deal with either. He immediately retreated. In a flash, countless giant bats swarmed over, blocking Long Feiyi's line of sight. They were so densely packed that it was like a wall of bats. If anyone with a phobia of fear saw this scene, they'd definitely go crazy. The wall of bats fell towards Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi. Long Feiyi broke through the wall with his whip and scattered the bats. But it was at this moment that Qi Yaotian suddenly appeared behind them and swept his fan towards Han Yunqi's head. Sensing the flow of air behind him, Long Feiyi shielded Han Yunqi and turned to the side. He kicked out and forced Qi Yaotian to retreat. However, the swarm of giant bats swarmed over from behind almost at the same time, looking like they were about to swallow them whole. Qi Yaotian wasn't willing to be outdone. He took the initiative to attack again. With a wave of his fan, countless illusory images of the fan appeared. It was hard to tell which of the illusory images was the real attack. Gradually, Han Yunqi, who was protecting Long Feiyi, began to feel overwhelmed. However, he never loosened his grip on Han Yunqi's waist. Suddenly, an especially large bat scuttled out from under their feet and bit towards Han Yunqi's arm with its ferocious mouth. Long Feiyi dealt with Qi Yaotian while dodging. After a few rounds, the large bat was enraged and bit down viciously on the arm that Long Feiyi was holding onto Han Yunqi. It didn't let go. Once the Bat King was killed, based on the habits of the large bats, they would definitely seek revenge. Moreover, they would seek revenge crazily at all costs. Even the controller wouldn't be able to control them anymore. Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi were in danger. Indeed, as soon as the Bat King landed on the ground, the large bats that were flying chaotically in the air suddenly flapped their wings and stopped. Qi Yaotian immediately retreated far away, a flash of ridicule in his eyes. He was planning to compete with Long Feiyi for a while longer, but never expected that stupid woman Han Yunqi would actually make a move against the Bat King. How could such a stupid woman be worth such a high price from Tianning's Empress Dowager? How could she be worth Long Feiyi's protection? Silence reigned around them. Only the fluttering of the bat's wings could be heard. The atmosphere suddenly turned very strange, even more Ningjing than before a storm. Han Yunqi, you're such an idiotic woman. Someone come. All of you attack together. Lung Shuang couldn't take it anymore. She threw away all of her face and self-respect, even ignoring the heat in her body that was gradually subsiding. She suddenly raised her sword into the air to stand by Long Feiyi's side. Together with her 10 assassins, she was going to face the revenge of the large bats together with Long Feiyi. Fourth young Miss Long, what do you mean by this? Qi Yaotian laughed coldly. That's exactly what I mean. The Duke of Qin is an honored guest of my city of daughters. Lung Shuang replied icily. Fourth young Miss Long, you'd better think it over. You can't afford to ruin my carefree city's plans. Qi Yaotian warned Lung Shuang. Although the City of Daughters and Carefree City weren't on good terms, they'd always coexisted peacefully and minded their own business. I've said it before, His Highness Duke of Qin is an honored guest of my City of Daughters. As long as my City of Daughters is here today, no one is allowed to act presumptuously. Lung Shuang was so agitated that she grew bolder and bolder as she spoke. Qi Yaotian retorted with every word, his attitude growing more and more unyielding. However, even though the two of them were speaking, the parties involved, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi, didn't even listen to them, let alone take them to heart. Long Feiyi vigilantly stared at the giant bats that could attack them at any time, while Han Yunqi was completely focused on the dead giant Bat King on the ground, as if she was waiting for something. Lung Shuang spoke agitatedly, but Long Feiyi didn't say anything for a long time. She thought that if she stood out at this time, Long Feiyi would at least have a whole new level of respect for her. She couldn't help but look back, only to discover that Long Feiyi had completely ignored her existence. At this moment, Lung Shuang felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head, extinguishing all her enthusiasm. What exactly should she do for this man to place her in his eyes? What exactly should she do for this man to be willing to be on good terms with City of Daughters? Looking at Long Feiyi's hand around Han Yunqi's waist, the usually calm Lung Shuang couldn't control her jealousy for the first time. At this moment, all the bats in the surroundings suddenly flapped their wings violently, and the sound of their wings flapping became noisy all of a sudden. The swarm of giant bats was indeed about to launch a crazy revenge attack. A trace of anticipation flashed past Lung Shuang's eyes. She was looking forward to letting Long Feiyi see what kind of woman could be of help to him. Qi Yaotian, who was at the side, was even more impatient to see Long Feiyi's performance. One had to know that he had raised giant bats for so long, but he had never seen the giant bat's terrifying revenge attack. The sound of flapping wings became louder and louder, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. Take care of your face, Long Feiyi said in a low voice as he hugged Han Yunqi even tighter. Han Yunqi could feel his nervousness. However, Han Yunqi wasn't nervous at all. She felt the warmth of his palm on her waist, and a trace of warmth flowed through her heart. Long Feiyi, even if you two are only husband and wife in name and only need to use each other, as long as you sincerely protect me at this moment, then I will also sincerely protect you at the same time. Suddenly, a giant bat launched an attack. It retracted its wings and shot towards Han Yunxi like an arrow released from a bow. Han Yunxi's lips curled into a ruthless smile. She shot out a golden needle and accurately shot the leading giant bat backwards, landing on the giant bat king's body. "Ungrateful little bastard," she snorted disdainfully. Hearing this, Qi Yaotian, Lung Shuang, and even the top 10 assassins were all in disbelief. Lung Shuang couldn't help but roar. "Han Yunxi, do you still not understand the seriousness of the situation? You ignorant woman." "Hee, I didn't think that Qin Wangfei was such an interesting woman. Wouldn't it be a pity to kill her?" Qi Yaotian also couldn't help but laugh mockingly. A complicated look flashed through Long Fei Ye's eyes. Just as he was feeling suspicious, the countless giant bats floating in the air all retracted their wings and attacked as a group. It was a moment of imminent peril. It was about to start. They were about to attack. Nervous, Qi Yaotian didn't have time to smile as he excitedly held his breath. Lung Shuang hurriedly pulled out her long sword, and the top 10 assassins immediately followed suit. At this moment, the atmosphere had truly reached its peak. Suddenly, nearly 100 giant bats all gathered together. But Chapter 220. All the giant bats had gathered together. Once they attacked in a frenzy, the consequences would be unimaginable and impossible to guard against. However, just as everyone thought that the vengeful attack was about to begin, the large group of giant bats actually gave up on attacking Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. They actually swarmed towards the giant bat king's corpse on the ground like crazy. For a moment, everyone was stunned. How could this be? No one was more shocked than Lung Shuang and Qi Yaotian. Both of them were flabbergasted and couldn't believe what they were seeing with their own eyes. They saw the giant bat king's corpse on the ground. It was unknown whether it was due to the impact of the leading bat or some other reason, but the blood seemed to be flowing out from the pores all over its body. It was extremely terrifying. Of course, everyone only took a glance at this scene because very quickly, the group of giant bats drowned the giant bat king's corpse. The dense mass of bats blocked everyone's line of sight. Why was this happening? Weren't they supposed to attack the culprits, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi? What were they doing? What were they trying to do by surrounding the giant bat king? And what happened to the giant bat king's corpse? Why did it suddenly burst with blood? Qi Yaotian was very unwilling to suspect this, but he couldn't help but suspect that these giant bats were being controlled by someone else. This was simply too unexpected. All sorts of questions made everyone look at Han Yunxi in disbelief. At this moment, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had already landed on the ground. Of course, Long Fei Yi didn't let go of Han Yunxi. That embrace wasn't just to protect her, it was more like a declaration of ownership. Without asking further, Long Fei Yi also understood that this woman must have used poison. She only knew how to use poison. However, just this poison alone was enough to give him endless surprises and surprises. Although they looked at Han Yunxi in disbelief, whether it was Qi Yaotian or Lung Shuang, they didn't believe that the giant bat's strange behavior had anything to do with Han Yunxi. So what if this woman could use poison? At most, she could poison 1 or 2 giant bats to death. How could she control the giant bats? They'd rather believe that Long Fei had done something behind the scenes. The swarm of bats surrounded the giant bat king's corpse. They were so dense that it was impossible to see what they were doing. Qi Yaotian didn't dare to act rashly. Judging from their exchange just then, he was very clear that he couldn't do anything to Long Fei without the bat swarm. Lung Shuang didn't bat an eyelid either. She stared fixedly at Han Yunxi, desperate for an answer. It didn't take long for the stench of blood to spread out from within the swarm of bats. At first, it was just 1 or 2, but soon there were more and more of them. Soon, the ground was littered with corpses, and they were all covered in blood, just like King Colossal Bat. Their expressions were gruesome, and it wasn't long before the corpses were all covered in blood. This, Qi Yaotian finally revealed a shocked expression. He had raised giant bats as pets since he was young, so he had a deep understanding of them. However, he couldn't explain this scene. Lung Shuang didn't dare to look any longer, afraid that she would vomit. Soon, nearly 100 giant bats were all dead. The ground was covered in black corpses, and every one of them was dripping with blood. The sight of it made one's scalp tingle. Where the giant Bat King's corpse had been, there was only a pile of bones left. The black bones were gone, and there wasn't even a trace of blood on the ground. Heavens! The giant bat swarm was completely annihilated. Qi Yaotian couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. He looked at Han Yunqi, but Long Shuang couldn't move her eyes away. Poison! It must be poison. That was why the black bones appeared. It was this woman's doing. Under the shocked gaze, Han Yunqi was calm and collected. She wanted to walk over, but Long Fei held her tightly. She couldn't help but whisper, "Your Highness, it's fine now. Can you let go?" At her words, Long Fei realized that he'd made a move. He didn't say a word, but immediately released her. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Han Yunqi gracefully walked over and took out a needle to collect the blood from the giant bats. She sniffed lightly, then turned back to smile at Long Fei. "Your Highness, the giant bat poison has been cultivated." She'd never seen giant bats before, but she'd read about them in ancient poison texts. They were a type of raw material used to make poisons. She just poisoned the giant Bat King to death and used its blood to attract other giant bats to fight over it. Poison on top of poison. She'd really managed to cultivate giant bat poison. Usually, the poison produced by killing each other in a group was highly toxic. Han Yunqi, you. Qi Yaotian finally realized how frightening this woman was. He also understood why Tianix's Empress Dowager had offered such a high price for her head. Unfortunately, it was too late. He originally thought that Tianix's Empress Dowager's true target was the Duke of Qin, but now it seemed that this woman was no less frightening than the Duke of Qin himself. Han Yunqi glanced at him and imitated his polite tone. "Eldest young Master Qi, what other instructions do you have to bestow upon me?" Qi Yaotian was momentarily at a loss for words. He didn't know how to reply. The giant bats were his only pets, but now they were all gone. To Long Fei, all of this was within reason, but also beyond his expectations. He was very satisfied and nodded towards Han Yunqi. "Come here then." Han Yunqi was too lazy to pay attention to Qi Yaotian. She hid the needle she'd used to collect the giant bat poison in her wrist and obediently walked back to Long Fei's side. Long Fei immediately wrapped an arm around her waist again. Anyone who saw him would be jealous. Even if there was nothing between them now, and there wouldn't be anything between them in the future, she was still someone under his name. He was always this domineering, especially in front of outsiders. Han Yunqi had long gotten used to it. She only knew that there was nothing left for her to do after this. As expected, Long Fei didn't waste words. He suddenly raised his whip and swept it past the blood-stained bodies of the giant bats before swinging it towards Qi Yaotian. Now that the giant bat's poison had been nurtured, it was time for its master to have a taste. Qi Yaotian recovered his wits and immediately dodged out of the way. Long Fei's whip seemed to have eyes of its own as it chased after him, refusing to let him go. Without the giant bats to help him, Qi Yaotian couldn't afford to be arrogant. He was forced into a passive position as he dodged again and again. Several times, he tried to escape, but failed. Of course, if this stalemate continued, he still had the skills to protect himself from Long Fei. But once again, Han Yunqi surprised him. While he was focused on dodging Long Fei's whip, Han Yunqi silently aimed for his neck. "You think you're amazing for raising giant bats as pets? I'll give them back to you." Swoosh! The sharp sound of the whip echoed. Before Qi Yaotian could react, the poison needle had already pierced his neck. He casually wiped it and a pool of black blood appeared. Han Yunqi laughed. "Young Master Qi, the poison produced by the giant bats biting each other is a rare item. I'll give them back to you." Qi Yaotian was greatly alarmed. At this moment, Long Fei's whip ruthlessly swung over. This time, Qi Yaotian didn't dodge and took the full brunt of the whip. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. There was a lacerated whip mark on his body, and even the blood was black. Long Fei wasn't stupid enough to kill him. After all, killing the young master of Carefree City would cause a lot of trouble. He was busy and didn't want to stir up trouble. The life of this king's woman is priceless. If Carefree City wants to accept another bounty, you might as well try. He warned coldly. Priceless life. Han Yunxi liked this word. As if she was used to his tyranny, she directly ignored the first 5 words. She smiled brilliantly and magnificently. Young Master Qi, if you want the antidote, come to King Qin's residence in 3 days and buy it. Your life will be at the price of the employer. All the bounties Qi Yaotian had accepted over the years were big ones. It was normal for him to fail. However, he had never been in such a difficult situation. He stood up and took a deep look at Han Yunxi. How many people in the martial arts world knew that Long Fei was good at whips and had amazing martial arts? How many people knew that Han Yunxi was not only good at detoxification, but also that poison could be used as martial arts? He thought that when he returned this time, he had to remind his father to blacklist Han Yunxi and Long Fei in Carefree City and not accept any more bounties easily. Long Fei wouldn't kill him, but the antidote to save his life was still in Han Yunxi's hands. He had no choice but to be polite. He stood up and made a graceful bow with clasped hands. Farewell, both of you. After saying that, he wanted to leave gracefully. However, after a few steps, he spat out a mouthful of black blood and almost fainted. In the end, he had to be supported by his guards to leave. Seeing this, Han Yunxi could not help but burst into laughter. This was the first time that she had beaten her enemy so badly. It was so beautiful. As it turned out, there were many ways to use poison. She could adapt to the situation at any time. Han Yunxi found that she was getting more and more proficient in the art of poison. Han Yunxi thought that this was the end of the matter. However, Long Fei did not put away his whip. He slowly raised his hand and looked coldly at the top 10 killers of the City of Daughters. At this time, Han Yunxi finally remembered that there were still people from the City of Daughters. All right, how could she forget about this woman who had scolded her twice for being stupid? The top 10 killers looked at Long Fei's whip that was stained with giant bat's poison and were all frightened. They did not have the courage from before and retreated behind Leng Shuang. Leng Shuang did not know what to say. At this moment, she wished that she could find a hole to hide in. She had scolded Han Yunxi so loudly, but she did not know that she was the one who was truly stupid and ignorant. Had Long Fei long been mocking her in his heart? She had actually argued with him so confidently and even pulled out her sword to help him. It turned out that her wishful thinking was so laughable. What did he want to do when he raised his whip? Leng Shuang was about to speak when Long Fei suddenly swung his whip. He did not hurt anyone. Instead, he swung his whip fiercely in the air as a warning. After that, he turned around and left. He did not even bother to make a move. Leng Shuang was stunned for a long time before she chased after him. Han Yunxi, where's the antidote? She still had the aphrodisiac in her body. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi turned around and smiled generously. I was lying. That's just a normal poison. It will disappear after a long time. Leng Shuang froze on the spot. She had never been humiliated as much as she had been today in her entire life. Han Yunxi, although I don't want to admit it, I, Leng Shuang, have indeed underestimated you. From now on, I will not underestimate you again. Although Long Fei did not smile, Han Yunxi had a feeling that this guy was in a good mood. He did not let go of her hand, so she could only obediently follow him. She realized that this guy was actually heading in the direction of Medicine City. This is obviously the Empress Dowager's ambush. Aren't you going to look for Mother Su? She asked in a low voice. At the very least, she had to interrogate Leng Shuang about Mother Su's whereabouts. If she said that she did not know, would she really not know? Shuangqing was nothing. Mother Su was the most important thing. Unexpectedly, Long Fei said, Tang Li should have succeeded. What did he mean? Chapter 221. Should Tang Li have succeeded? Han Yunxi was surprised as she followed Long Fei back to Medicine City's Wang clan. But even after they left, Leng Shuang was still frozen in place. The 10 assassins exchanged glances, but no one dared to speak. To their left, Gu was leaning lazily against a large tree, the lush foliage covering his body. He didn't care who was chasing after Long Fei. All he wanted was for the various factions of Cloud Realm Continent to join forces and wipe out the Duke of Qin's estate. He only cared about Han Yunqi. That poison needle had clearly come from the Tang clan, and the giant bat's poison wasn't simple at all. Just what had Han Yunqi done to the giant bat king in such a short time to cause internal strife? Gu waited until Long Shuang and the rest had left before flying down to carefully examine the giant bat king. Unbeknownst to him, someone was still lurking on the right side of the forest, watching everything. This person was none other than the head of Tianning's Imperial Physician Courtyard, Gu Beiwei. His attention seemed to be focused on the giant bat corpses as well. When he saw Gu looting all of the giant bat corpses, a complicated look flashed through Gu Beiwei's eyes. Then he turned around and vanished into thin air. Even top experts would be flabbergasted at such speed. This man had hidden his strength well. By the time Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi arrived at Medicine City's Wang clan, it was already daybreak. As for Mama Su, she had long been kidnapped by Tang Li and brought to the Wang clan. Han Yunqi realized in hindsight that the Empress Dowager had indeed found Mama Su at Medicine City's Mu estate. She'd purposely released news to test Long Fei Yi while offering bounties to the City of Daughters and Carefree City to surround and attack Long Fei Yi. On the other hand, she'd sent a group of palace experts to secretly pick up Mama Su. But as it turned out, Long Fei Yi played along and distracted the people of the City of Daughters and Liberty City so that Tang Li could kidnap Mother Su easily. In fact, before the people of the City of Daughters and Liberty City retreated, Tang Li had already kidnapped Mother Su very smoothly. It had to be said that when she saw Tang Li standing in the garden in his snow-white clothes from afar, Han Yunqi once again had a beautiful illusion. However, when he opened his mouth, all the beautiful thoughts were destroyed. A long time later, Han Yunqi told Tang Li that every time she saw him, she wanted to poison him to make him mute. Tang Li broke out in a cold sweat. As soon as Long Fei Yi walked over, Tang Li immediately claimed credit. I didn't use any hidden weapons. I killed all of them with my bare hands, leaving only one alive to report back to the Empress Dowager. I think the Empress Dowager will be so angry that she won't be able to sleep for a few nights. Where is she? Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunqi's eyes lit up. Tang Li didn't kill Mother Su immediately because he wanted to wait for Long Fei Yi to come back and interrogate her. Could it be that she could use this opportunity to find out more about his background? She didn't want to know so much at first, but this fellow had already told her about the Tang clan. It'd be too fake if she wasn't curious. If this fellow's mother was a member of the Tang clan, then who was his father? The women of the Tang clan didn't marry outside the clan. So why was Long Fei Yi brought to the palace as soon as he was born? He wasn't someone who coveted glory, wealth, power, and status. Why did he continue to stay in Tianning's imperial clan? I was bored waiting for you guys, so I forced a confession out of her. That, before Tang Li could finish, Wang Gong cut in unhappily from the side. She was accidentally forced to death. Long Fei Yi's gaze turned cold at these words. His gaze shot towards Tang Li like an arrow. Tang Li immediately raised his hand and swore, I found out before she died. Mother Su never told anyone about this. Those palace experts secretly kidnapped her. The Mu clan didn't know anything either, so she can die. Can die? Han Yunqi's head was full of black lines. If this fellow wasn't the young head of the Tang clan and Long Fei Yi's close friend, she would definitely doubt his reliability. Seeing Long Fei Yi's cold expression, Tang Li quickly smiled apologetically and added, the body's already been cleaned up. Don't worry. Duke of Qin? Although the Empress Dowager didn't have any evidence, but the truth was revealed in the end, Wang Gong said sincerely. Mother Su's death didn't mean everything was over. It only meant that the Empress Dowager and Emperor Tianhui couldn't touch Long Fei Yi for now. Still, Long Fei Yi's origins had aroused their suspicions. Emperor Tianhui had always been on guard against Long Fei. Now that his suspicions had arisen, it was impossible for Emperor Tianhui to tolerate his unscrupulous ways of eliminating dissidents. He'd rather kill the wrong person than kill the wrong person. He'd never give Long Fei a chance to rest. In other words, Mother Su's death wasn't the end, but the beginning of a reign of blood. Long Fei Yi gave Wang Gong a meaningful look. Without a word, he walked towards the depths of the flower gardens. Wang Gong and Tang Li immediately followed. Han Yunqi hesitated a bit before following as well. She had many questions, but they all came to one conclusion: Long Fei's ambitions. Emperor Tianhui wanted to protect Tianning's throne and country, but did Long Fei want these things, or more? It was impossible to estimate the breadth of this man's heart. Han Yunxi stared at his cold and lonely back. For the first time, she felt a strong desire to know more about him. When they reached the pavilion, there were only 3 seats at the stone table. All 3 of them sat down, leaving Han Yunxi forgotten on one side. Long Fei seemed to only notice her presence now. He glanced at her before rising to his feet and speaking to Wang Gong. What's bound to come can't be avoided. He didn't intend to elaborate after that, but had Wang Gong arrange a carriage so they could return to the capital. Did he stop talking because she was here? Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with disappointment, but she remained silent. It wasn't until they bid farewell to Tang Li and Wang Gong and boarded the carriage that she spoke up. Lady Tianqin, how much have you found out? Long Fei didn't expect Han Yunxi to ask such a question. What do you mean? I also want to know my mother's origins, as well as her relationship with Medicine City. I also want to know. Han Yunxi hesitated before she continued. I also want to know who my birth father is. She really couldn't see through this man. He told her about the Tang clan, but was also on guard against her knowing more. He'd nurtured her and given her assassination weapons, but sometimes drew a clear line between them. If her birth was the reason for his unease, then she didn't mind telling him everything to dispel his doubts. Not to mention that she only liked him a little. Even if she liked him a lot, she still had her own principles and wouldn't lose herself. She was very clear about her situation. Her status as Qin Wangfei meant that she had to hug this man's thigh in order to survive peacefully in the capital. She hoped that they could trust each other and treat each other honestly. She could help him a lot, and perhaps he could also uncover Lady Tianqin's secret. Long Fei looked at her with a complicated gaze. He had already interrogated Han Kongan, so of course he knew about Han Yunxi's birth. What he was surprised about was this woman's attitude. This wasn't a woman who would be swayed by emotions or led by the nose. What are you looking at? You already knew that I wasn't Han Kongan's biological daughter, didn't you? Han Yunxi asked openly. So? Long Fei still didn't bat an eyelid. So I'll make it clear to you today. If you think that I'm useful, please don't doubt me or be on guard against me. I've said it before, you're my boat. I have no need to trick you. If you have the slightest bit of doubt, please don't disturb me in the future. I'll pretend that I didn't hear anything that I heard before. I'll know my place and be a respectable Qin Wangfei. I'll guard the Duke of Qin's manor and only be responsible for not embarrassing you. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei without blinking as she spoke very seriously. Actually, when she moved out of Hibiscus Courtyard that day, she had wanted to say these words to him. It had nothing to do with love or romance. It had to do with her position and even her fate. Long Fei's complicated gaze deepened. He also looked at Han Yunxi, but didn't reply for a long time. Han Yunxi also didn't say much and waited. Time slowly passed between the two of them in silence until the carriage stopped in front of the Duke of Qin's manor. The carriage driver had already set up the footstool, but unfortunately, neither Long Fei nor Han Yunxi had any intention of dismounting. After a long time, Long Fei finally opened his mouth. His voice was cold and even contained a hint of warning. Quickly understand the perplexing butterfly illusion. This prince's other matters have nothing to do with you. He rejected her. In the end, he still had to be on guard against her. Her heart couldn't help but tighten, but Han Yunxi still maintained her calm. She said seriously, so in the future, I'll have to trouble your highness to not let me know so much. This concubine's heart is small and timid. This concubine can't tolerate so many secrets. Keep your courage and heart in check. You don't know much. Long Fei heartlessly stated the truth. She really didn't know much. Han Yunxi's heart felt stifled. In the end, she couldn't say anything in response. She could only watch as Long Fei got off the carriage. Just like that, Han Yunxi was disappointed. Her self-confident and proud self even began to wonder if she'd thought too highly of herself. Han Yunxi didn't bring up the matter again. As for the perplexing butterfly illusion, she still couldn't figure out its toxicity, so she couldn't store it in her detox system. For now, she could only keep it to herself. After returning to the estate, Han Yunshi only told Grand Concubine that Mama Su had died and told her not to worry. She didn't explain too much, and the palace was calm and peaceful. Over the past few days, Han Yunshi was in a gloomy mood. She was easily angered and explosive, but the people of Carefree City just had to come knocking on her door. They wanted the antidote at a high price, but Han Yunshi went back on her word and demanded 3 times the price for the antidote. She had no idea that her gloominess had thoroughly offended the people of Carefree City. Qi Yaotian personally swore that he'd make Han Yunshi spit out 3 times the price one day. The calm days only lasted for a few days. Soon enough, Han Yunshi heard that there was a transfer of personnel in the imperial court. All of the civil and military officials were in a state of panic. Without a doubt, Emperor Tianhui had made a move against Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't meddle in the affairs of the imperial court, but he had plenty of people in the court. His influence was considerable, so Emperor Tianhui couldn't do anything to him. Naturally, he'd make a move against the people around him. Among them, the most unexpected was the young General Mu Qingwu. Nobody knew whether Mu Qingwu was one of Long Fei Ye's men, but everyone knew that Mu Qingwu was one of the Crown Prince's archenemy, the second imperial prince. He'd always been hated by the Crown Prince's faction. Emperor Tianhui's move against him this time proved that even if he wasn't one of Long Fei Ye's men, he still held an important position in the game of power. Rather than an important position, it was more accurate to say that he held an important position in the military. Emperor Tianhui ordered Mu Qingwu to gather 300,000 taels of pay and provisions for the troops and 200,000 dan of grain within half a year. Otherwise, he'd be demoted and investigated. 300,000 taels of pay and provisions was a matter of money, but 200,000 dan of grain was a problem that even money couldn't solve. When Han Yunshi heard the news, she felt that Mu Qingwu had gotten shot even when he was lying down. Unexpectedly, she was in trouble as well. This trouble was Chapter 222. Han Yunshi never would have thought that her problem would be the crown prince, Long Tianma. Long Tianma's old illness had flared up. In the middle of the night, she was sleeping soundly. She was so shocked by this news that she almost fell to the ground. After calming down, she asked many questions, but eunuch Luo, who came to invite her, didn't say anything. He only said that the crown prince's old illness had flared up and the emperor was furious, urgently summoning her to the palace. Han Yunshi immediately smelled the scent of a conspiracy. Long Tianma's old illness was a strange fetus in fetus. This illness was different from other illnesses. Once the surgery was successful, it would not flare up again. Moreover, she had already expelled all the poison from Long Tianma's body, so there would not be any side effects. Han Yunshi knew that it would not be easy to come out of the palace this time. If it was anyone else that was poisoned, she could just say that she didn't understand and refuse. She did not receive a salary from the Imperial Doctor's Hospital, so she had no obligation to treat anyone. However, Long Tianma's illness was something that she had personally overturned Han Kongan's diagnosis and cured, so she had no choice but to face it. It was not easy to peacefully live in a corner. Actually, ever since she was betrothed to Long Fei Yi, she was destined to be restless. All right, since trouble had come knocking on her door, she'd go take a look. She wanted to see what kind of side effects Long Tianma had developed out of the blue. When she was about to leave, Zhao Mama quickly stopped her and asked in a low voice, "Princess Consort, His Highness did not come back tonight. Should I send someone to inform him?" Han Yunshi hesitated a bit before refusing. No need. Zhao Mama wanted to persuade her, but Han Yunshi had already left. "There's no time to lose, let's go." Han Yunshi did not refuse and calmly got into the carriage to urge eunuch Luo to set off. Upon arriving at the Eastern Palace, the first person Han Yunshi saw was none other than Imperial Physician Gu Beiwei. Han Yunshi had hidden the truth about Long Tianma's illness from the rest of the world. Only Gu Beiwei knew about it, and Gu Beiwei had been the one to assist her during her treatment. Gu Beiwei should know that there was no such thing as an old ailment under these circumstances. In other words, she hadn't left any clues for Emperor Tianhui to pick up on. But Gu Beiwei's expression was very unsightly. He was about to speak when Emperor Tianhui walked out from the inner rooms. Emperor Tianhui was dignified and cold, lofty and aloof. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as he stared at Han Yunxi as if she was his prey. Han Yunxi had seen those eyes before when she'd threatened him to save Long Feiyi. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't afraid. That time had been a fluke during the plague. Han Yunxi was very clear that she didn't have the right to threaten Emperor Tianhui. After all, even Long Feiyi had to deal with him step by step. Of course, being afraid didn't mean she'd submit. She bowed gracefully and bowed her head in greeting. 10,000 blessings to your majesty. Emperor Tianhui scrutinized Han Yunxi cold, not allowing her to rise. Back then, he'd only wanted to use this woman to humiliate Long Feiyi, but never expected a woman like her to stir up wave after wave and ruin his plans again and again. Emperor Tianhui didn't speak for a while. Han Yunxi bowed, her back aching terribly. She was about to speak up when Gu Beiwei beat her to it. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's illness is more important. Emperor Tianhui had always trusted Gu Beiwei, but his attitude had changed ever since Gu Beiwei came to the Han family clinic. He gave Gu Beiwei a meaningful look before saying cold, Imperial Physician Gu, do you remember the consequences of Han Kong'an's misdiagnosis? Your Majesty, it's still debatable whether esteemed Wang Fei made a misdiagnosis. His Highness's illness. Before Gu Beiwei could finish, a sharp and arbitrary voice came from the inner rooms. It's a misdiagnosis. Imperial Physician Gu, you're the head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard, but you can't even see such an illness. If your grandfather's spirit is in heaven, he'll be grieving and hating. Didn't they say an old illness flared up? Now it's a misdiagnosis? Who came to the conclusion? Han Yunxi looked towards the source of the voice and saw an old man slowly walk out. He looked to be around 70 years of age, with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had a long white beard, and his gait was dignified. He was even more spirited than a young man. Most old men like this would have the air of an immortal, but this one exuded an air of arrogance that was hard to ignore. If not for Emperor Tianhui's presence and his imperial aura, his aura would be even stronger. Who else dared to speak so loudly in this place? Director Shi, His Highness Crown Prince's illness still hasn't been determined. If you speak like this, it's rather lacking in the rigor of a doctor. Gu Beiwei's tone was flat, but it carried an air of authority. Director Shi? Han Yunxi was stunned. The director of Medical City's Medical Academy, Shi Yuba, who lived in Western Zhou for a long time. She never expected it to be him. Of the Medical Academy's directors, the youngest was Han Kong'an, while the oldest was Shi Yuba. Lady Tianxin must have helped Han Kong'an quite a bit to become a director of the Medical Academy. In terms of medical skills, Shi Yuba was enough to throw Han Kong'an off the road. Although they were both directors, Han Kong'an was only a divine doctor, while Shi Yuba was a primogenitor of medicine. The title of director wasn't a symbol of medical skills, but of one's status. At the same time, she activated the detox system, which didn't give her any notifications. But the pulse was exactly the same as before, a slippery one. A pregnancy pulse was a type of slippery pulse, which was why Han Kong'an had diagnosed it as a pregnancy pulse, but Han Yunxi had concealed the truth and said it was poison. Then what about now? What did Director Shi say? Han Yunxi didn't rush to ask, but pressed down on Long Tianma's stomach instead. She was so startled that she almost withdrew her hand. Heavens, the condition of his stomach was exactly the same as before. It was extremely similar to a pregnancy. After the examination, Han Yunxi looked suspiciously towards Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei furrowed his brows, his face full of worry as he reminded her that this wasn't an easy matter to deal with. It was obvious that someone had done something to the stomach, but they couldn't figure out what had happened. Director Shi, what's your diagnosis? Han Yunxi finally spoke. What are you admitting that you made a mistake? Director Shi asked disdainfully. Even if His Highness Crown Prince's current condition is the same as before, it doesn't mean anything. There are many diseases with similar symptoms. I'm sure Director Shi knows better than I do. It's very possible that the Crown Prince is suffering from another disease. Han Yunxi refused to budge an inch. Another illness? Then tell me, what illness is it this time? Director Shi refused to let the matter go. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely not the same cause as before. Han Yunxi was resolute. Of course, it's not the same cause as before. Your previous diagnosis was wrong. Director Shi denied it outright. Qin Wangfei, listen well. The Crown Prince's illness is called ascites. Ascites? Han Yunqi almost spat out her saliva at those words. Actually, when she first heard that the Crown Prince's stomach was big, her first thought was that it was this illness. However, she rejected that thought when she took his pulse. This was a professional term. In layman's terms, it was a pathological accumulation of fluid in the body. The amount of fluid in the abdomen exceeded the normal value. There was a small amount of fluid in the abdomen that flowed out to lubricate the intestines. Under pathological conditions, the amount of fluid in the abdomen increased. When it exceeded 200 milliliters, it was called ascites. Ascites wasn't a primary disease. It was caused by other diseases in the body. Although Han Yunqi was a poison doctor, she worked in the hospital all year round and had seen many diseases. She had seen a child who was a few years old. He was all skin and bones, but his stomach was bigger than a pregnant woman's. She understood this illness. She believed that Gu Beiwei understood it even more. There was no reason for them not to be able to diagnose it. Judging from Long Tianma's pulse, it didn't have anything to do with ascites. Besides, if it really was ascites, then it was impossible for his stomach to suddenly become so big in such a short period of time. A month ago, hadn't Long Tianma been hosting the spring hunt and was doing well? Judging from his pulse and the time of his illness's onset, it's not ascites. Han Yunqi refuted on the spot. At this time, Gu Beiwei also spoke up. Director Shi, let's not talk about the present. Let's talk about the past. The Crown Prince was bedridden for 7 years. If it was ascites, how could he not become thin? How could he survive 7 years? Chapter 223. Once a person had ascites, they lose weight. Moreover, most ascites were caused by malignant diseases. How could Long Tianma have endured for 7 years? Director Shi's diagnosis was full of doubtful points. In fact, it was completely baseless. But when faced with Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei's questions, Director Shi dismissed them with a single sentence. He said self-righteously, "You're talking about common ascites, but His Highness Crown Prince is suffering from a rare chronic form of ascites. The disease flares up slowly, similar to pregnancy. It was because of Qin Wangfei's misdiagnosis and careless use of poisons that caused the disease to flare up so suddenly. If old man hadn't arrived in time, His Highness Crown Prince's life would have been over." Director Shi's words were so convincing that they made it sound as if it were true. Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh coldly. She'd heard that ascites was divided into 3 types: leaky, exudative, and bloody, but this was her first time hearing about chronic ascites. This fellow was a medical primogenitor, so he could create his own school of thought. What a bunch of nonsense. Who knew what he'd done to Long Tianma's body when Emperor Tianhui invited him here? That's why his abdomen was swollen and his pulse was slippery. A few days ago, when Emperor Tianhui made a move against young General Mu Qingwu, Han Yunqi assumed that he was seizing the chance to suppress the second imperial son's arrogance and push the crown prince down. Who knew that Emperor Tianhui was willing to use the crown prince to get rid of her? If Mu Qingwu couldn't gather enough provisions within half a year, his military authority would be revoked. The second imperial son would have lost half an arm, while the crown prince's mishap would have created a stalemate between the 2 factions in court. In the end, Emperor Tianhui would be the one to gain the most. This old fox was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Han Yunqi was about to explain herself when Emperor Tianhui suddenly issued a cold order. Han Yunqi's medical skills aren't good enough. She swindled and almost caused the crown prince to lose his life. Someone come. Lock her up in the prisons. As soon as he spoke, 2 imperial guards rushed in to detain Han Yunqi. I'm not convinced. Today, Han Yunqi finally understood what it meant to have power over justice, and what it meant to have the emperor above the sky in the world of imperial power. Your Majesty, I'm not convinced. Director Shi doesn't have any evidence. He's wrongly accusing me. Han Yunqi angrily said. Emperor Tianhui didn't allow her to explain. Director Shi is a director of the medical academy and a 6th-rank primogenitor doctor. How could he make a mistake? Han Yunqi, if you still refuse to admit your mistakes, we will definitely not let you off easily. Min, take her away immediately. Han Yunqi gave a cold laugh. She didn't make any more futile attempts to explain herself, but her lips curved into a mocking smile as she narrowed her eyes at Director Shi. Her eyes were clear and bright, as if they could see through everything. A 6th-grade medical grandmaster. Do the elders of the medical academy know that you are so capable? She left behind these words before the Imperial guards took her away. Director Shi's face was ghastly white. Without a doubt, Han Yunqi's words were a warning to him. Emperor Tianhui might be able to protect him in Tianing, but the medical academy wasn't a place where Emperor Tianhui's words counted. He couldn't let the medical academy know about this. Gu Beiwei allowed Han Yunqi to be taken away without saying a word. He had long predicted this would happen before Han Yunqi entered the palace. All he wanted to know was Director Shi's diagnosis. In the silence of the room, Director Shi finally looked towards Gu Beiwei. I heard that Imperial Physician Gu approved of your previous diagnosis as well? Nonsense. Nonsense. If he didn't approve, why would he have argued with Han Yunqi just then? Director Shi's question was giving Gu Beiwei some leeway to argue. At his words, Emperor Tianhui looked over as well. He knew that Director Shi had been trying to rope in Gu Beiwei all this time. Gu Beiwei was still young, but his medical skills had long reached the level of a 5th-rank divine doctor. His future prospects were immeasurable. Add that to Grandfather Gu's connections and his current position as head of the academy, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to apply for a director position in the medical academy. Moreover, Grandfather Gu was a 6th-rank primogeniture doctor as well. When he was a director, he'd been kind to others and made friends with many people. He had a high reputation and earned the respect of many of his peers. Amongst the directors, he was a spiritual leader. If Grandfather Gu hadn't passed away, he might have entered the Council of Elders by now. In this line of work, reputation and seniority were important. Even after Grandfather Gu's death, many people would still give Gu Beiwei face and take care of him. This was also why Emperor Tianhui placed Gu Beiwei in an important position and didn't make a move against Gu Beiwei after the Han family's free clinic. Roping in Gu Beiwei would be a great help to Director Shi when he entered the Council of Elders in the future. But Gu Beiwei refused a toast, only to be forced to drink a forfeit. He didn't explain himself, but simply nodded. Yes. Moreover, this junior still agrees with esteemed Wang Fei's diagnosis. Director Shi was caught off guard. His old face fell as he approached Gu Beiwei and said in a low voice, Imperial Physician Gu, a wise man submits to circumstances. Your grandfather has already passed away a long time ago. You have nothing to do with the medical academy now. In other words, Director Shi admits to framing esteemed Wang Fei and has a guilty conscience. Are you afraid that the medical academy will pursue the matter? Gu Beiwei retorted seriously. He looked like a frail, gentle, and modest gentleman, but Gu Beiwei never gave anyone face when it was time to be blunt. Director Shi had not only been rejected, but humiliated as well. A lofty man like him had always been respected and flattered by his juniors, so he'd never suffered such humiliation. His face alternated between red and white, but he couldn't speak. Emperor Tianhui didn't expect Gu Beiwei to be so insistent. After all, Gu Beiwei had been in the Imperial Physician Courtyard for many years and had seen all sorts of infighting in the Imperial harem. He'd faced plenty of temptations and roped in as well. He'd always been a loner, unmoved by anyone or anything. But now he was helping Han Yunqi because he had his heart set on the Duke of Qin. Or had Han Yunqi used some sort of bewitching spell on him? No matter what, Emperor Tianhui wasn't planning to keep him around any longer after what he'd said today. Someone come. Imperial Physician Gu neglected his duties and aided the tyrant in his tyranny. He knows his wrongs and refuses to mend them. Throw him into the prisons as well. Han Yunqi retorted a few more times, but Imperial Physician Gu didn't even say a single word of injustice. He only gave the unconscious Long Tianma a pitying look before allowing the Imperial guards to escort him out. Director Shi watched Gu Beiwei's retreating form with a sigh despite his anger. Such a young man. What a waste. The medical academy? Emperor Tianhui trailed off. He was more concerned about that. Your Majesty, don't worry. His Highness Crown Prince's illness can't be cured by anyone besides this old official. Even if the Council of Elders came, they wouldn't have the right to speak. Director, she wouldn't have dared to do such a thing for Emperor Tianhui if he didn't have some skills. Emperor Tianhui nodded his head in satisfaction. But as soon as he left the Eastern Palace, he ran into the Empress Dowager, who'd hurried over after hearing the news. This meant that news of Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's imprisonment had spread very quickly. The Empress Dowager was still brooding over Mama Su's death. Emperor Tianhui had told her to rest and recuperate, but she'd only rested for a few days before something happened to her most treasured grandson. Chongping had already passed away, so they lost a perfect marriage alliance. Meanwhile, the Empress's health was fluctuating. Now she only had the Crown Prince left. Although the other imperial sons were her own grandchildren, the Crown Prince was still born of the Empress and the future of the imperial uncle's estate. Once he lost power, the imperial uncle's estate would fall. Your Majesty, just what happened? Immerse was perfectly fine. So why did his illness suddenly act up again? The Empress Dowager asked. His old illness acted up again. Fortunately, Director, she was here, or else the consequences would have been unthinkable. Emperor Tianhui sighed with emotion. He wasn't telling the truth to his own mother. 20 years ago, this mother had wholeheartedly helped him fight for the throne, but now her heart was all on the Crown Prince. The heartless nature of the imperial family included husband and wife. Only the newlyweds laughed in the imperial harem, but not the old. Brothers and sisters were heartless as well. Countless brothers and sisters fought and killed each other. Parents were even more heartless as well. Father and son, mother and son, would fight for their own interests one day. Although Emperor Tianhui had made Long Tianma the Crown Prince and spent countless efforts to nurture him, Long Tianma could change. Times were changing as well. Emperor Tianhui wasn't even 50 years old yet, so he had his own plans. Isn't it a malignant tumor? Wouldn't everything be fine once the poison was treated? Why did it act up again? The Empress Dowager asked. If she couldn't sniff out the fishy details, then she'd be Emperor Tianhui's mother in vain. It really was a misdiagnosis. If Mua doesn't believe me, then go take a look for yourself. Jin still has urgent business to attend to, so I won't accompany Mu Hu, Emperor Tianhui said respectfully. The Empress Dowager was an intelligent woman. A complicated look flickered past her eyes before she stopped doubting him. Then can Director she cure Tianma? It'll take some time. Mu Hu doesn't need to worry. Emperor Tianhui's words were a heart-strengthening drug for the Empress Dowager. She nodded and said, Emperor, you can go busy yourself. I'll go take a look at that pitiful child. Naturally, the news spread out of the palace and caused an uproar as soon as daybreak. This wasn't the first time Han Yunxi had been imprisoned, but the fact that she'd been imprisoned for the sake of the Crown Prince wasn't the first time she'd been imprisoned. Even an idiot could tell that things were serious this time. At the Duke of Qin's estate, Zhao Mama had ignored Han Yunxi's orders to search for His Highness Duke of Qin after she left last night. Unfortunately, she couldn't find him. Currently, Long Feiyi was at the solitary enclosure, so he knew the situation like the back of his hand. Tang Li was sitting by his side, looking over with a teasing smile. Your Highness Duke of Qin, you've dragged esteemed Wang Fei down so badly. Why aren't you thinking of ways to save her? After witnessing Han Yunxi's abilities and courage, Tang Li quite liked her. But that woman's identity was still unknown. Long Feiyi had been investigating Han Yunxi for a while now, but he couldn't do anything about it. He tried multiple times to ask him about Han Yunxi's origins, but this fellow always avoided the question. Thus, Tang Li could only keep his distance from her. Director Shi insisted that it was a misdiagnosis, so the only people who could save her now were the medical academy's people. Long Feiyi didn't have any connections in the medical academy, but he had people in Medicine City. Medicine City was medicine. Without medicine, there was nothing to be done. Without medicine, medicine was a pile of trash. Medicine City and Medical City had always been close family. On one side, Chu Shifeng had been waiting for His Highness Duke of Qin's orders as well. But Long Feiyi wasn't in a rush. Instead, he said meaningfully, your lordship would like to see just how capable Gu Beiyue is. At these words, Chu Shifeng and Tang Li exchanged glances with tacit understanding. Neither of them said a word. Long Fei wasn't in a rush to save her, but he made a high-profile appearance at the Justice Court's prisons that very afternoon to visit them. Chapter 224. When had His Highness Duke of Qin ever visited the Justice Courts, much less visited anyone in prison? News of Qin Wangfei's imprisonment had already spread like wildfire. The Crown Prince was still under treatment, and the Emperor had yet to convict anyone, so everyone was more interested in the Duke of Qin's movements. But who knew that he'd come directly to the prisons without even entering the palace? Official Ouyang of the Justice Courts was naturally one of Emperor Tianhui's men, but he didn't dare to slight His Highness Duke of Qin. With His Highness Duke of Qin's schemes and methods, he could easily remove his official hat at any time. Between Emperor Tianhui and His Highness Duke of Qin, even a third-rank official like him had to tread carefully as if he were treading on thin ice. Originally, Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei had been separated into different prison cells and treated like normal prisoners. Official Ouyang had even prepared a torture chamber for them to await Emperor Tianhui's orders. As soon as he heard His Highness Duke of Qin's arrival, official Ouyang arranged for them to be placed in clean and comfortable cells in the prisons. Each of them had their own cell separated by an iron gate and treated with the highest standards. As for why Long Fei was visiting the prisons in a high-profile manner, that was because he'd ordered someone to report his intentions before he even arrived at the Justice Courts. This meant that the Justice Courts had to formally receive him. A carriage bearing the Duke of Qin's insignia stopped in front of the Justice Court's main gates. Long Fei was dressed in fine robes as he stepped off the carriage on the back of a servant. He was handsome and aloof, noble and inviolable. All of the doors of the Justice Courts were wide open. Official Ouyang and all of the officials knelt at the foot of the steps to welcome him. It was a spectacular sight, so it was hard for the entire capital not to know that the Duke of Qin had come to visit. How was this a prison visit? Those who didn't know better might even think that His Highness Duke of Qin had come to inspect the Justice Courts, but Long Fei didn't place any importance on their respect. He walked past official Ouyang and said cold, "Still not leading the way?" "Yes, yes." Official Ouyang hurriedly got up and personally led the way. This was his first time seeing His Highness Duke of Qin up close, but he was so intimidated by his cold and solemn aura that he didn't even dare to raise his head. Long Fei did not ask anything along the way and went straight to the prison. Unfortunately, he bumped into Han Yunqi from afar. She was leaning against the iron gate and whispering to Gu Beiwei. The two of them were whispering to each other intimately. He stopped abruptly and watched without batting an eyelid. Even His Highness Duke of Qin would get jealous? Did this man, who made countless women go crazy, need to be jealous? Lord Ouyang and the rest who were following by the side didn't know what was going on and didn't dare to make a sound. Lord Ouyang mustered up his courage and carefully raised his head. When he glanced at Long Fei, he immediately broke out in cold sweat and didn't dare to raise his head again. Heaven knows what a frosty face it was. Lord Ouyang began to doubt whether his arrangement of the prison cells was right or wrong. Amidst the silence, the air grew tense. It wasn't until Han Yunqi inadvertently turned her head and saw them that everyone let out a sigh of relief. It was as if something big would have happened if she hadn't looked over. Han Yunqi hadn't expected this. She'd only entered at dawn, but Long Fei had arrived in just half a day. She knew that even if Zhao Mama didn't say anything, this guy would quickly find out about this matter. She just hadn't expected him to come here. She had just been discussing this matter with Gu Beiwei. Apart from the people of Medicine City, no one else would be able to help them. Long Fei should be very clear about this. He was on good terms with the Wang clan of Medicine City. It shouldn't be difficult for Duke Wang to come forward and find the Council of Elders. Han Yunqi didn't mention any of this to Gu Beiwei. She was only puzzled. What was this guy doing here instead of going to the Wang clan? Of course, no matter what he was here for, she'd be safe now that he was here. Han Yunqi didn't hide the pleasant surprise in her eyes as they shone brightly. "Greetings to Your Highness Duke of Qin." Gu Beiwei bowed. Han Yunqi murmured, "Your Highness." Long Fei didn't say anything. As soon as he approached, official Ouyang hurried forward to open the lock. Unexpectedly, Not only did Long Fei have no intention of entering, he even questioned him coldly, "Official Ouyang, who allowed you to open the lock of a criminal personally appointed by His Majesty?" Everyone was startled by these words. Even Han Yunqi was taken aback. She didn't understand what he meant. Gu Beiyue stood in the shadows, so his expression couldn't be seen. However, Long Fei didn't allow him to rise. He maintained his salute from beginning to end. Official Ouyang was even more confused. He stepped back and said, Yes, your Highness is right. This official has failed in his duty." Long Fei didn't enter, but he couldn't just stand there. Official Ouyang hurriedly ordered someone to bring a chair for him to sit outside the cell. Tea, pastries, and incense were all served. Long Fei lazily sat down. He wasn't in a hurry to speak. If he didn't speak, Han Yunqi, who didn't understand the situation, wouldn't speak. This made Official Ouyang very anxious. He was at a loss. What did His Highness Duke of Qin mean by this attitude? Should he tactfully step aside and let His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei speak alone? Or should he continue to stand guard here and listen to what they had to say? Official Ouyang, His Majesty has imprisoned the criminal in the justice courts. Are you in charge of this case? Long Fei finally spoke.
Yes.
Official Ouyang didn't dare to reveal too much. He complained inwardly. How was His Highness Duke of Qin here to visit him? He was simply here to interrogate him. When will the trial begin? Long Fei asked again. This official is also waiting for His Majesty's orders. Official Ouyang really didn't know. According to the law, can Qin Wang Fei be bailed out until the trial begins? Long Fei asked again. So Long Fei had come to bail her out. At least this guy still had a bit of humanity. Han Yunqi's heart finally relaxed. Your Highness, according to the law, a criminal personally appointed by His Majesty cannot be bailed out, unless, before Official Ouyang could finish speaking, Long Fei raised his hand to indicate that he didn't need to explain. His attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. The Son of Heaven is guilty of the same crime as the common people. Official Ouyang is an impartial person worthy of praise. Official Ouyang was overwhelmed by the favor and didn't know how to reply. Han Yunqi hadn't expected this at all. She creased her brows and stared at Long Fei. Just why had he come? Long Fei's eyes were calm as he prepared to continue speaking. But it was then that an announcement came in. Qin Wang Rong has arrived. Qin Wang Rong. Who was Qin Wang Rong? Tianning's nobility was divided into 6 ranks: Wang, Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, and Baron. Wang was a direct descendant of the imperial clan. In terms of status, Qin Wang Rong and the Duke of Qin were both Qin Wang. But in terms of seniority, both the Duke of Qin and Emperor Tianhui had to call Qin Wang Rong imperial uncle. Qin Wang Rong was the late emperor's younger brother. Qin Wang Rong was the #1 official who'd helped the late emperor conquer the country. After the late emperor ascended the throne, he'd retired from the scene and rarely interfered with court affairs. Although he had no power in name, he had a high reputation within the imperial clan. When the late emperor was still alive, he was the one who had the most say by his side. During the struggle for the throne, various factions had tried their best to rope him in, but Qin Wang Rong had always remained neutral. He never favored any of the princes. Now that Tianning was under Emperor Tianhui's rule, this old Qin Wang who'd rejected him in the past still had the right to speak. Whether it was Emperor Tianhui or the Duke of Qin, they had to respectfully call him imperial uncle whenever they saw him. Who would have thought that Qin Wang Rong would show up at a time like this? Why had he come? Had Emperor Tianhui invited him here to intimidate His Highness Duke of Qin? But that didn't seem likely. After all, Qin Wang Rong hadn't shown his face during the struggle for the throne, but he still doted on His Highness Duke of Qin the most. Official Ouyang was about to go greet him when Qin Wang Rong arrived. His thick eyebrows reached his temples, and his eyes were bright and spirited. Although he was old and his hair had turned white, he still looked luxurious and majestic. His scholarly robes couldn't hide the stern and dignified air of a man who'd spent half his life on the military. Han Yunqi had long heard of this Qin Wang Rong's illustrious name. Besides Long Fei, this old Qin Wang was the most respected of all the princes in Tianning. What kind of wind was blowing today to bring Tianix's most respected prince here? The justice courts were honored to shine with golden splendor. No one else knew why Qinhuang Rong had shown up, but Han Yunxi had an inkling. It looked like news of Mama Su had reached this old Qinhuang's ears. Long Feiyi rose to his feet and even said respectfully, "Imperial uncle, long time no see." Han Yunxi followed the others in making deep bows. Greetings to Qinhuang Rong. May Qinhuang Rong live thousands and thousands of years. Qinhuang Rong didn't even consider Han Yunxi worthy of his attention. He didn't even spare her a glance as he sat down in Long Feiyi's seat. "Fei, your lordship just heard about this and came to take a look. I'm not bothering you, am I?" Long Feiyi didn't answer directly. Instead, he said cold, "Han Yunxi, why haven't you thanked Imperial Uncle for his concern?" Han Yunxi expressed her thanks, but Qinhuang Rong didn't accept it. Instead, he laughed coldly. "Your lordship came for the crown prince. I came specifically to see what kind of despicable woman dared to swindle her way into the palace and plot against the crown prince." Silence fell upon the crowd at his words. Han Yunxi clenched her fists and prepared to retort, but Long Feiyi said, "If she wasn't the daughter of the Empress Dowager's savior, would His Majesty have trusted her so easily? It's a pity." Long Feiyi didn't finish his sentence, but only gave a light, mocking laugh. Han Yunxi looked at him in disbelief. Belatedly, she realized that this guy hadn't come to bail her out at all, but to express his stance and draw a clear line between them. Because of Mama Su's matter, the great changes in the court, the crown prince's illness, and Qinhuang Rong's appearance, he was going to abandon the rook to save the king? How could he be this kind of person? Han Yunxi tightly clenched her teeth. Her anger towards Long Feiyi overshadowed her dissatisfaction towards Qinhuang Rong. She didn't want to believe it, because he already knew that he would throw her out one day. Was that why he refused to tell her all his secrets? She really had been willing all along. For the first time, Han Yunxi discovered that she was pitifully stupid. Long Feiyi's attitude also surprised Qinhuang Rong. However, Qinhuang Rong was a shrewd old man, not a calf that was easy to scare. Han Kongan has already misdiagnosed once, and now this kind of thing has happened. Chapter 225. Han Yunxi didn't hear what Long Feiyi and Qinhuang Rong said after that. Until they left, she stood still with her head lowered. Her mood was very low. To be exact, it was disappointment. When she moved out of the hibiscus courtyard and was rejected in the carriage, she wasn't this disappointed. But, this time, Long Feiyi, it turns out that you're nothing more than this. As soon as Long Feiyi left, official Ouyang came back and couldn't wait to switch Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei back to their original cells. Gu Beiwei wanted to say something to Han Yunxi, but unfortunately, he didn't even have the chance. This woman had always been a source of light. Even in the darkest world, she had the power to illuminate herself. But now, she was like a dim, luminous pearl, lifeless. One of them was brought to the right, and the other to the left. Although Gu Beiwei was silent, he looked back again and again, his eyes flashing with concern and distress. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi was completely immersed in her own world and forgot about Gu Beiwei's existence. Long Feiyi abandoned the rook to save the king, and Gu Beiwei was also in prison. At this time, who could find the higher-ups of the medical school to save them? Who would save the Han family? In fact, Han Yunxi had a trump card in her hand. Not only could she save herself, but she could also save many people. Unfortunately, she didn't think about Mother Su's matter at all. Back in the smelly and dirty little black prison, Han Yunxi leaned against the cold wall. Her eyes were dark and her heart was cold. Official Ouyang looked at her disdainfully and didn't avoid it. He actually ordered in front of her, "Come, from now on, 3 meals a day according to the standards of a condemned prisoner." Official Ouyang was recommended by Official Su of the Ministry of Appointments. When Han Yunxi bullied Madame Su and the Han family's eldest young master, Official Ouyang was the one who was most troubled. Now that the situation was clear, how could Lord Ouyang not take revenge? Of course, because of Han Yunxi's identity, Official Ouyang didn't dare to torture her, but he could still torture her for a few days. Official Ouyang originally thought that Han Yunxi would be angry, but who knew that Han Yunqi was like a dead person, standing there without any reaction. Official Ouyang didn't feel any sense of accomplishment at all and was very dissatisfied. Just as he was about to walk over and humiliate him, the jailer hastily stopped him and whispered, "My lord, this subordinate feels that the question His Highness Duke of Qin asked before he left is very strange." Long Feiyi left after seeing Prince Rong off. Before leaving, he asked official Ouyang one last question in a low voice. According to the law, can they live in the high-class prison? According to the law, Gu Beiyue's status didn't allow him to live there, but Han Yunqi's status definitely did. That's what official Ouyang had said. Actually, according to the law was a neutral term. Everything had to be done according to the law and handled according to the law. One couldn't ask for special privileges, nor could one use private punishment to avenge personal grudges. But people tended to overlook the latter. Official Ouyang wasn't an idiot, but he didn't think too much of it after seeing the Duke of Qin agree with Prince Rong. He only assumed that the Duke of Qin had asked casually before he left. What's strange about it? She's already an abandoned chess piece. As this official sees it, His Majesty won't interrogate her, but just wait to convict her. Official Ouyang had no idea that his words had revealed the truth behind today's visit. Unfortunately, it was already too late by the time he realized the truth. As soon as Prince Rong left, he went straight to the palace. Emperor Tianhui had long set up a chessboard and been waiting for a long time. After Prince Rong went into seclusion, he'd become obsessed with chess. In the world, only he and Long Feiyi dared to break Emperor Tianhui's chessboard, while Long Feiyi was the only one capable of doing so. When it came to chess, Qin Wangrong preferred Long Fei. But today he was exceptionally patient. He sat down and played a few moves before speaking. It looks like there's no need to interrogate this woman. Naturally, Emperor Tianhui was already aware of the situation at the justice courts. He'd schemed against Han Yunqi to give Long Feiyi a hard time and threatened Han Yunqi to reveal the truth about Mama Su. Now Long Feiyi's attitude of abandoning the rook to save the king made it clear that the woman knew nothing about Mama Su. Otherwise, Long Feiyi's strict personality wouldn't have thrown her away so easily. Han Yunqi wasn't an ordinary woman, so he had to be on guard against the possibility that Han Yunqi would expose Mama Su and bite him in the back. It's a good thing that Zhan prepared 18 tortures for her, Emperor Tianhui said coldly. If not for Long Feiyi's trip today, Han Yunqi would have suffered a lot in the justice courts in the coming days. Prince Rong disdained Emperor Tianhui's cruelty to women. He gave a cold snort and said, "Instead of going to war against a little girl, it's better to spend more time on the Duke of Qin's origins. Our Tianning's imperial bloodline can't be sullied." Seeing Qin Wangrong's disdainful expression, Emperor Tianhui felt uncomfortable despite his deference to the man. He was the ruler of a nation who couldn't be looked down upon. Yes, Imperial Uncle's teachings are right. He didn't plan to continue the topic. Of course, he didn't plan to torture Han Yunqi either, lest Prince Rong look down on him again. In the end, dealing with women wasn't something a man should do, much less the demeanor of a nation's ruler. Although it was surprising, Prince Rong's appearance made the Duke of Qin's compromise reasonable. Han Yunqi's trial was the Duke of Qin's first step to compromise. Emperor Tianhui believed that the first step would lead to a second, then a third. Once the Duke of Qin's henchmen were taken care of, he refused to believe that the Duke of Qin had 3 heads and 6 arms to break free of his inescapable net. Long Feiyi had just returned to the solitary enclosure when Tang Li rushed to meet him. "Long Feiyi, have you gone mad?" he demanded. Long Feiyi arched a brow at him, but didn't answer. Instead, he asked Chu Shifeng, "Have there been any movements from Medical City?" Chu Shifeng didn't even get a chance to reply before Tang Li grabbed Long Feiyi by the collar. "You forced Han Yunqi into a corner. What if she reveals the truth? And don't forget that the perplexing butterfly illusion is in her hands too." Long Feiyi shoved Tang Li's hand, but the latter refused to let go. Long Feiyi shoved again without using any strength, but Tang Li was sent flying until he crashed against the door. He elegantly straightened out his collar and asked, "Isn't this the best chance to test her?" "That's too high of a price." Tang Li wasn't convinced. "Your lordship can afford to lose," Long Fei was nonchalant. You. Tang Li was infuriated, but had no words to retort. He simply sat on one side, too lazy to speak. Chu Shifeng was stunned as well, but if he had to seriously answer whether he believed Han Yunxi or not, he'd still believe her. That woman was different from other women, perhaps even better than men. She had her own principles and strength of character, as well as the confidence to do certain things. Of course, Chu Shifeng didn't dare to say too much. He only reported, "Your Highness, there's no news from Medical City for now, but the palace has found out that director she needs 10 days to cure the crown prince. That means, esteemed Wang Fei, and the rest still have 10 days. A complicated look flickered past Long Fei's eyes before he muttered, "Continue to keep an eye on Medical City." Today's high-profile visit wasn't just a show for Emperor Tianhui, but Gu Beiwei as well. He was very curious as to why this genius divine doctor, who could have been like a fish in water in Medical City, had condescended to stay in Tianning's imperial physician courtyard for so many years. 3 days later, there was still no news from Medical City. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei were locked up in 2 separate cells with no chance to interact with each other. Their treatment as prisoners on death row made things difficult for them. Gu Beiwei didn't touch any of the spoiled food sent to them, but only drank water to maintain himself. It wasn't until the 4th day that an unfamiliar jailer used the excuse of delivering water to approach the bars. Gu Beiwei calmly walked over. "How is it?" Gu Beiwei asked in a low voice. "Someone beat us to it. Luo Zuishan's already asked for instructions from the Council of Elders. He'll reach Tianning's capital tonight," the jailer replied. "Long Fei?" Gu Beiwei asked doubtfully. He had a way to get in touch with Medical City on the day of his capture, so he had his reasons for not moving immediately. "It's not the Duke of Qin. There's been no movement from him at all." "It's Gu," the jailer replied. Gu Beiwei's eyes lit up as he seemed to understand something. He smiled faintly. He's smart enough to know to find Luo Zuishan. Who was Luo Zuishan? Besides the late grandfather Gu, there were only 2 other 6th-ranked primogeniture doctors in the medical academy. One was Director Shi, and the other was Director Luo Zuishan. It wasn't easy to invite the elders of Medical City's Council of Elders. Moreover, they had their own misgivings, so they might not be as effective as Luo Zuishan. Luo Zuishan and Director Shi were sworn enemies. Neither of them could stand to see the other doing well. Once Luo Zuishan found Director Shi's weakness, he'd disregard all face and fight to the death without yielding an inch. "Master, this guy Gu's background." Before the jailer could finish speaking, Gu Beiwei motioned for him to shut up. Even after being imprisoned for so long, he was still dressed in snow-white robes and looked as graceful as an immortal. In the darkness, he made a shushing motion and pressed a white jade finger against his thin lips, giving off an indescribable sense of nobility and mystery. "Go, we'll wait and see." His voice was as light as a spring breeze. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Just who was Gu Qixiao? At this moment, this evildoer was in Han Yunxi's cell. This was already his 3rd visit, and each time he came, he was carrying a large bag. She didn't know where he'd found the key, but he'd boldly opened the door and entered without alarming the jailers. It could be considered a miracle. Every time he came, he brought along a clean quilt, a bag of dry rations, and a bag of hot food. Although they were all wrapped up in a large bag, they were packed in an orderly fashion. Even the scents didn't affect each other. Every time Han Yunxi opened the bag, she had the illusion that Gu wasn't an evildoer at all, but a perfect man for traveling. He said that the quilt had to be changed every day so she could sleep soundly. The dry rations were her snacks, while the hot food was her main meal. Don't worry, he'd guarantee she'd be able to walk out of here within 10 days. Of course, even if Han Yunxi didn't pay him much attention, he still persisted in asking her 3 questions. "Just what's your relationship with the Tang clan? Who taught you the poison arts? Who's your real father?" As a matter of fact, he was helping Han Yunxi change her bed as he asked her questions. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi was crouching on one side with a bowl of fragrant white rice, gorging herself on it. Ever since Grand Concubine starved her for days and nights, she couldn't stand hunger. Without Gu, she'd have long fainted from hunger. Chapter 226. Gu tidied up the bed and saw that Han Yunqi was enjoying her meal. He did not question her further and just sat by the side to watch her eat. In the cold darkness, a man dressed in red with a devilish face appeared. He looked like a demon, noble and mysterious. His long and narrow eyes were slightly narrowed as he admired the prey in front of him. The more he looked, the more he liked her and the more satisfied he was. His smile grew wider and wider. Clearly, Han Yunqi was the one who was full, but he was the one who was satisfied. Han Yunqi was full. She turned back and could not help but roll her eyes. Did she look that good when she was eating? This was not the first time Gu had been mesmerized by her. I'm full. You can leave. She was very heartless as she drank the water. No matter how heartless she was, Gu was never angry. He muttered to himself, "Poison girl, if you like someone, do you feel full when you look at her?" Han Yunqi immediately spat. What kind of lousy analogy was that? Did he think that she was a man-eating fox demon? If you don't leave now, the prison guards will come to patrol, she kindly reminded him. Gu Qixiao reined in his thoughts and said seriously, "You still haven't answered my question." Han Yunqi did not use the saying, "One has to be blinded by gifts." She asked self-righteously, "You haven't answered my question either. Why are you asking so many questions? How do you know so much about the Tang sect? Why? Is this very important to you?" The last time in the Han family courtyard, Gu had revealed a lot of information in a moment of impulse. Han Yunqi remembered all of it. Long Fei Yi had said that he had misunderstood. Could it be that this guy was looking for Long Fei Ye's secret? Han Yunqi had a feeling that there was a big secret here. Of course, even if she was in prison, she would not betray Long Fei Yi. This was a matter of her integrity. Gu raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He leaned over and smiled meaningfully. "Poison girl, if you follow me in the future, I'll tell you everything. How about that?" "With you?" Han Yunqi really didn't understand what this word meant. "Be my woman," Gu blurted out. Han Yunqi was stunned for a moment before she chuckled. "This joke isn't funny at all." Gu wanted to say more, but Han Yunqi mimicked him and smiled innocently. "If you don't leave now, I'll call for help." She was always like this when they were talking about the most important things. Gu took a deep breath, but he still left immediately. It was not that he was easily frightened, but Han Yunqi really knew how to scream. He had personally experienced it several times. After leaving the cell, Gu did not leave. He landed on the roof and lay down with his arms behind his head. He thought that it was not a good idea to continue asking. He had to think of a way to test this woman, but that would have to wait until she got out of the prison. In his opinion, the crisis had basically been resolved with Luo Zuishan's arrival, but who knew that things were far from as simple as he'd imagined. The Supreme Court accepted Luo Zuishan's complaint that very night, but they didn't immediately start the trial. Luo Zuishan had to wait for news. Since ancient times, dealing with the government required procedures, and there was room for manipulation in the procedures. There was a university that asked about it. Luo Zuishan went to the Supreme Court the next day, but unfortunately, he was still dismissed with "a case has been accepted and is going through the process." In the palace, Director Shi was seizing the time to treat the crown prince, Long Tianma. Although Director Shi had a card up his sleeve, if he could cure the crown prince and then face Luo Zuishan, it would save him a lot of trouble. He wasn't afraid of the Medical Academy's elders' investigation. On the contrary, he was afraid of Luo Zuishan. Luo Zuishan was the best at nitpicking and pestering. If there was even the slightest dispute over the details, there would be no possibility of the case ending. Thus, he had to wake up the crown prince before the trial began and destroy all evidence. Then there wouldn't even be an egg left, and Luo Zuishan wouldn't be able to nitpick. It's not easy to find Luo Zuishan, is it? Who has the skills? Emperor Tianhui was surprised as well. It had taken him a lot of effort to find Shi Yuba, but in just a few short days, someone had managed to find Luo Zuishan. At the very least, this person had some connections with the Medical Academy. Emperor Tianhui's first suspect was Long Fei, followed by the Han clan, who had connections with the Medical Academy and knew of the Crown Prince's misdiagnosis. Han Kongan used to be a director of the Medical Academy, so the Han clan naturally had connections to the Medical Academy. but Hong Kongan had already been removed from the list, so the possibility wasn't high. As for Long Feiyi, although he'd never heard of him having connections with the medical academy, Emperor Tianhui felt that he was the only one with such skills in the capital. This fellow had abandoned the rook to save the king. Could it be? On the 6th day, Emperor Tianhui came to his senses, but it was already too late. After Luo Zuishan was dismissed by a minor official from the justice courts a second time, his irritable temper flared up. He actually took out the command token from the medical academy and questioned Shi Yuba's diagnosis in the name of the Council of Elders. No matter whether the patient was the son of heaven or the crown prince, he demanded that Shi Yuba bring along the patient and all relevant information and personnel to the medical academy for a public consultation. Shi Yuba was so stunned by the news that it took him a while to recover. A command token from the Council of Elders? How is that possible? He couldn't believe it. Luo Zuishan's appearance in such a short time was already surprising enough, but he'd even brought a command token with him. The command token was the symbol of the Council of Elders. How did Luo Zuishan get his hands on it? Why would the Council of Elders believe his one-sided words and give him the command token so easily? After all, the Council of Elders had only given the command token to 2 directors in the history of the medical academy. One was Third Elder, who'd already joined the Council of Elders, while the other was Gu Beiyue's grandfather. Leaving aside how Luo Zuishan had gained the Council of Elders' trust, he'd been living in seclusion in a border city of Northern Li. For days was already very fast for him to reach Tianning's capital city, so how did he get the command token from the medical academy? If possible, Shi Yuba would definitely suspect that Luo Zuishan's command token was fake. But Luo Zuishan didn't have the guts to do so. No matter how Shi Yuba thought about it, he couldn't help but feel that there was something fishy going on. In the midst of his shock, Emperor Tianhui came to find him. He'd always respected Shi Yuba, but this was the first time he'd questioned him so rudely. What's up with the Council of Elders command token? Did the Council of Elders question your diagnosis? Your Majesty, there's something fishy about this matter. The person who invited Luo Zuishan here can't be simple. Shi Yuba was still relatively calm. Jin only wants you to treat the crown prince immediately and close the case, Emperor Tianhui said angrily. Shi Yuba could only shake his head. Your Majesty, we agreed on 10 days. Emperor Tianhui's eyes flashed with shrewd light before he said coldly, then Zhen will protect you for another 4 days. But in the end, Shi Yuba tactfully refused. Your Majesty, you know what the Council of Elders command token is. According to Tianning's laws, Luo Zuishan couldn't do anything to Shi Yuba, but the rules of the medical academy meant that Shi Yuba had no choice but to comply. Even a 6th-rank primogeniture doctor like him didn't dare to disobey or neglect an Council of Elders command token. Now that Luo Zuishan had brought out the command token, Shi Yuba had no choice but to comply despite his unwillingness. He brought the patient, all relevant information, and personnel with him to the medical academy. Otherwise, he'd never be able to survive in Cloud Realm Continent's medical community again. Emperor Tianhui finally revealed a sinister expression. Shi Yuba, do you think you can take away the crown prince and Zhen's 2 most wanted criminals? Shi Yuba knew that Emperor Tianhui wouldn't agree, but things had already developed to this point. He had no choice but to brace himself and keep going. Moreover, he was very confident in his own medical skills. Your Majesty, this one once promised that only I could treat the crown prince's illness. Even the Council of Elders wouldn't dare to question me. Now they're only asking for a consultation. So why do we have to throw ourselves into confusion? Emperor Tianhui coldly looked at him without a word. Shi Yuba added, if your Majesty doesn't allow this one to take away His Highness Crown Prince, then this one can only use the patient's family as an excuse to refuse the consultation. But once I refuse, this one's diagnosis will be deemed invalid by the medical community as well. If Shi Yuba's diagnosis was invalid, then Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's crimes would be impossible to convict. Emperor Tianhui finally realized that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Chapter 227. Rather than saying that Emperor Tianhui was stuck between a rock and a hard place, It was more accurate to say that he was riding a tiger and couldn't dismount. Luo Zuishan had already taken out the Council of Elders command token. Even if the justice courts wanted to open a trial for the crown prince's misdiagnosis, Luo Zuishan's personality would never agree. Emperor Tianhui looked gloomily at the crown prince on the bed. After some thought, he finally decided to agree to Shi Yuba's request to take the crown prince and Han Yunqi away. He didn't want to offend Medicine City's Council of Elders because of this. Of course, he had a condition. He wanted Qin Wangrong to accompany him. He wanted Qin Wangrong to travel with him, so he could keep an eye on Long Fei. Emperor Tianhui couldn't tolerate Long Fei having any connections with Medicine City. But Luo Zuishan and Qin Wangrong were about to set out, but Long Fei still hadn't shown up, nor did he express any opinions on the matter. Did his silence mean he agreed with Emperor Tianhui's decision? Who had invited Luo Zuishan was a mystery, as was Long Fei Ye's position. While Emperor Tianhui was pondering the matter, the various factions in the court were doing the same. Han Yunqi was currently being led out by the prison guards. She was filled with doubts as well, but she was trying to figure out Gu's origins. A few days ago, Gu had patted his chest to guarantee that she'd be released. She assumed that he'd break her out of prison, but he actually had the skills to invite Luo Zuishan over. Did he have a personal relationship with Luo Zuishan? Or was it related to Medical City's Council of Elders? Han Yunqi had investigated Medical City specifically for the sake of investigating Lady Tianqin. She had some understanding of the Council of Elders and the Council of Elders, so she naturally knew of Luo Zuishan as well. At the gates, Han Yunqi ran into Gu Beiyue, who'd been escorted out as well. The two of them smiled at each other before walking together. Esteemed Wang Fei, was it His Highness who invited Director Luo? Gu Beiyue probed in a low voice. Han Yunqi only smiled and retorted, "You were there when I visited the prison that day. Do you think that's possible?" Esteemed Wang Fei, to be able to invite Director Luo in such a short time. It's not simple. Gu Beiyue lowered his voice even more. In truth, as long as enough time passed and the news reached Luo Zuishan's ears, with Luo Zuishan's hostile relationship with Shi Yuba, Luo Zuishan would appear even without an invitation. However, the news couldn't have spread so quickly in such a short period of time. Therefore, there were only two possibilities for Luo Zuishan to appear. One was that someone had found Luo Zuishan through the Council of Elders, and the other was that someone had a personal relationship with Luo Zuishan and had directly found him. Han Yunqi hesitated for a moment and didn't say anything. She just shrugged and said, "I find it strange too." Gu Qixiao was a man who feared neither heaven nor earth. He never told her to keep a secret, but she still kept an eye out for him. As soon as they left the Supreme Court, they saw two groups of people. On one side was Luo Zuishan, and on the other was Qin Wangrong and Shi Yuba. Luo Zuishan drove a large carriage himself, and the medicine boy drove another. On Qin Wangrong's side, there was a large carriage and two prison carriages. As soon as he saw Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue come out, Qin Wangrong arrogantly ordered, "Come, take them to the prison carriages." Gu Beiyue was very calm, but Han Yunqi didn't obey. She had always yearned to go to Medical City. How could she sit in a prison carriage when it was her first time going there? Why should they sit in a prison carriage? Whether they were guilty or not was still undetermined. Han Yunqi was about to speak when an arrogant voice suddenly sounded, "Wait." Following the voice, she saw that the one who spoke was Luo Zuishan. His chin was raised high, and his goatee was sticking up as he spoke. He looked at everyone with disdain. He was so old, but he was even more arrogant than a young person. "Director Luo, is there anything else?" Qin Wangrong was still very polite. Unexpectedly, Luo Zuishan didn't even give face to Qin Wangrong. Stroking his goatee, his attitude was arrogant as he casually said, "Everything related to this case must be personally brought to the medical academy by this old man. Crown Prince, Qin Wangfei, Imperial Physician Gu." Before he could finish, Qin Wangrong couldn't take it anymore and said angrily, "That doesn't make sense. Leaving aside the Crown Prince, even Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue need your lordship's personal escort. They're Tianning's prisoners." Although Emperor Tianhui didn't want to offend Medical City, Qin Wangrong couldn't tolerate a trifling director reaching for a yard after getting an inch. He was used to being respected by others, but this was his first time meeting such an arrogant and rude fellow. Prisoners? Luo Zuishan arched an eyebrow at Qin Rong, a mocking smile on his lips. He didn't try to explain himself, but asked the man beside Qin Rong, Shi Yuba, according to Medical City's rules, what do you think should be done? Qin Rong found Luo Zuishan's mocking words especially glaring. He didn't care about Medical City's rules at all. His attitude was unyielding. Someone come. What are you spacing out for? Take them all to the prison wagons, immediately. The jailers were about to take them in, but Luo Zuishan wasn't in a rush. Cold, he threatened, Shi Yuba, do as you see fit. Shi Yuba's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Despite his reluctance, he endured it and acted like a peacemaker as he walked between Luo Zuishan and Qin Rong with a chuckle. Director Luo, the journey to Medical City is very long. We'll have to rely on Tianning's guards to protect us. Everyone's going the same way, so why be so serious? Luo Zuishan put on a fake smile. Director Shi, if you think there's no difference between the prison wagons and horse carriages, then you and Qin Rong can sit in them. At these words, not only did Shi Yuba's face turn black, but Qin Rong himself felt unwell. On the sidelines, Han Yunqi almost laughed out loud. Luo Zuishan was clearly shielding her and Gu Beiwei. He might be a bit arrogant, but he was also a wonderful and amusing person. Director Luo, your lordship won't bicker with you for the sake of the Council of Elders. You're already so old, don't. Seeing that Qin Rong was about to lose his temper, Shi Yuba forced himself to stop him. After all, he'd experienced Luo Zuishan's temper many times before. This time, he was quite confident in his own medical skills, so he'd let Luo Zuishan show off for a few more days. Long Tianma's illness was something that even the Council of Elders had no hope of curing, much less Luo Zuishan. This time, he not only wanted to earn merits in front of Emperor Tianhui, but also whittle away at Luo Zuishan's arrogance in front of the Council of Elders. Qin Rong, Director Luo was only joking. You mustn't take it to heart. Since Medical City has its rules, then everything will be done according to them. As Shi Yuba spoke, he gave Qin Rong a meaningful look. Qin Rong wasn't willing to compromise, but in the end he didn't say a word. Instead, he angrily flicked his sleeves and climbed into the carriage. Luo Zuishan had already gained the upper hand in their first meeting. He didn't stop while he was ahead, but arrogantly ordered Shi Yuba to bring over the Crown Prince's carriage and have his own medical attendant drive it. If Luo Zuishan was a flamboyant peacock, then Shi Yuba was a shrewd and calculating old fox. Seeing Shi Yuba's yielding attitude, Han Yunqi began to worry. You two, why aren't you coming over yet? At this moment, Luo Zuishan finally looked straight at her and Gu Beiwei. Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei quickly walked down the steps. Junior Gu Beiwei greets Senior Luo. Junior Han Yunqi has long heard of Director Luo's great name. Many thanks to Senior for saving us. Gu Beiwei was cultured and refined, while Han Yunqi was modest and courteous. But who would have thought that Luo Zuishan would glance at Han Yunqi and coldly snort, saving trash like you? Haha, don't think too highly of yourself. Old man was only acting according to the rules. Han Yunqi's smile suddenly froze on her face. Fine, everything this old man did was purely to disgust Shi Yuba. Sure enough, she was overthinking things. Luo Zuishan seriously sized up Gu Beiwei. Gu Yuendong's grandson? Gu Beiwei quickly replied, that's this junior. When grandfather was alive, he often mentioned Senior Luo, but before he could finish speaking, Luo Zuishan coldly snorted and interrupted, your grandfather's medical skills are average. I think you're just so. Gu Beiwei, who had the best temper, also froze. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. You drive the carriage. Follow the carriage in front. Luo Zuishan threw down these words and boarded the carriage, leaving Gu Beiwei and Han Yunqi looking at each other in dismay. Soon, Luo Zuishan impatiently urged, what are you standing around for? If you don't want to take the carriage, then run. This old man wasn't cute at all. Gu Beiwei obediently drove the carriage. Han Yunqi hesitated and inadvertently glanced around. She saw that the surroundings were empty and there was no familiar figure. Well, In this situation, Long Fei Yi not showing up was the wisest choice. Han Yunqi lifted the corner of her skirt and decisively boarded the carriage. She didn't enter the carriage, but sat beside Gu Beiwei. The medical assistant drove the carriage in front to lead the way, while Qin Wangrong and Shi Yuba followed behind them. The group left the justice courts and traveled further and further away. At this moment, a figure gradually grew clearer on the rooftops of the justice courts. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his figure tall and slender. His inky black hair fluttered in the wind. He stood loftily in the shadows, his cold eyes glinting with a cold light. He was like a king looking down on the world. Soon enough, Chu Shifeng arrived and murmured, "Your Highness, Wang Gong's found out. It really is someone surnamed Gu, but it's Gu, not Gu Beiwei." Gu? Long Fei Yi was surprised. He always knew that Gu had significant origins, but never expected him to be involved with Medical City. Of Cloud Realm Continent's 4 cities, Medical City, Medicine City, Carefree City, and the City of Daughters, Medical City was the most powerful and the most difficult to deal with. Leaving aside Emperor Tianhui, even Long Fei Yi didn't want to offend Medical City lightly. What was the relationship between Gu and Medical City? Why did that fellow want to investigate Han Yunqi's background? When Long Fei Yi saw that the carriage was about to disappear, he silently chased after them without a word. It would take at least 10 days to reach Medical City. 5 or 6 days had already passed, but Luo Zuishan hadn't said a word to Han Yunqi or Gu Beiwei. No matter how much this old man despised them, he should at least ask about the Crown Prince's illness, right? After all, Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei were the clearest on the matter. That afternoon, Han Yunqi went to sit in the carriage of her own accord. She saw old man Luo sitting in the main seat with his arms crossed. Although his shrewd little eyes were closed, his expression was still stingy and unkind. This old man was so arrogant. Did he already have full confidence in dealing with Shi Yuba? Did he know that Long Tianma's previous illness was a fetus in the womb? Shi Yuba was so calm in the face of the Council of Elders consultation. This old man seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Han Yunqi didn't know whether to worry or set her mind at ease. She glanced at Luo Zuishan before probing, "Senior Luo?" She followed Luo Zuishan and was tossed around in the carriage, completely out of control. Only the heavens knew how violently the carriage was jolting. Soon, the sounds of close combat could be heard from outside. The commotion was huge, and it seemed to be getting more and more intense. Qin Wangrong had brought many guards with him, so it was clear that there were also many assassins. Who were these assassins coming for? Almost everyone's first reaction was Han Yunqi. Who told her to be kidnapped so many times? Thus, most of the guards rushed towards her. But who would have thought that the assassins were actually coming for Crown Prince Long Tianma? In the chaos, the medicine boy was thrown off the carriage. 2 black-clothed assassins flew up and actually drove the carriage away. At this moment, everyone finally understood. All guards, protect His Highness the Crown Prince. Qin Wangrong shouted as he raised his sword and pushed aside the guards by his side to be the first to rush over. Unfortunately, there were too many black-robed assassins. Qin Wangrong was outnumbered and held back by a few of them. All he could do was watch as Long Tianma's carriage drove further and further away. As soon as the carriage was far away, the black-robed assassins began to retreat. How could Qin Wangrong be willing to give up? He cut off the carriage's reins and urged his horse to give chase. Seeing this, none of the guards dared to delay and followed closely behind. Soon enough, the scene was empty except for Han Yunqi's group. Luo Zuishan stroked his beard. Although he didn't say a word, his rapid movements betrayed his inner thoughts. It'd be best if Qin Wangrong could get the Crown Prince back. Otherwise, Emperor Tianhui had every reason to go to Medical City and demand the Crown Prince back. He was the one who'd started this, so he'd be in the most trouble then. Damn it, just where did these assassins come from? Why did they kidnap Tianning's Crown Prince? Qin Wangrong didn't return for a long time. Even Shi Yuba's patience ran out. Coldly, he looked at Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei and said in a strange tone, "This He, it's simply a conspiracy. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei would be the ones to benefit the most from Long Tianma's kidnapping and death. In other words, it was very possible that Han Yunxi and the rest had directed and acted out the kidnapping. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwen naturally understood Shi Yuba's meaning, but they were too lazy to pay him any attention. Luo Zuishan only laughed coldly and ridiculed. Are Tianning's guards all good-for-nothings? They can't even protect a single carriage? In other words, Shi Yuba was afraid of the Council of Elders' consultation and losing. It was very possible that Qinhuang Rong and Shi Yuba had directed and acted out the kidnapping. Shi Yuba was enraged. He was full of self-confidence and couldn't wait for the consultation to kick Luo Zuishan under his feet. Luo Zuishan snorted. He was equally full of self-confidence and wanted to suppress Shi Yuba during the consultation. Very soon, the two old men began to quarrel. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei sat in the carriage, exchanging glances. Besides waiting for news from Qinhuang Rong, they didn't know what to do for now. Of course, they were certain that Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba weren't the true culprits behind the scenes. Long Tianma had made plenty of enemies on a daily basis. Add that to the fact that he was the crown prince, and there were plenty of people in Tianning's court who wanted his life. Kidnapping the crown prince at a time like this is a bit interesting, Gu Beiwei chuckled in a low voice. Han Yunxi was still trying to figure it out when a group of black-robed assassins suddenly appeared from all directions and surrounded them. Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba immediately stopped arguing and stared at each other in disbelief. How could there be more assassins? Who were they targeting this time? Are you guys in cahoots? Han Yunxi asked loudly as she subconsciously reached out to protect Gu Beiwei behind her. She didn't know martial arts either, but she knew poisons and hidden weapons. She could still give it a try. Gu Beiwei allowed Han Yunxi to protect him as a trace of warmth flitted through his eyes. The leader of the black-robed men didn't answer Han Yunxi, but raised his broadsword. Brothers, attack! Capture them alive. You don't have the skills yet. Han Yunxi gave a cold snort. She was about to release her hidden weapons when the situation exceeded her expectations once again. All of the black-robed assassins suddenly rushed towards Shi Yuba and Luo Zuishan. The leader seized Luo Zuishan at lightning speed and turned to leave. What kind of rhythm was this? So these assassins weren't here for Han Yunxi, either? Halt! Han Yunxi reacted very quickly. As she shouted, her hidden needles flew out, several of them aimed at the back of the leader's head. But who would have thought that the black-robed man would suddenly turn around and use Luo Zuishan as a shield? Han Yunxi had used a lethal poison in a moment of desperation. He would die without a doubt and wouldn't even have time to detoxify the poison. It was over. If Luo Zuishan died, she and Gu Beiwei wouldn't be able to live either. Han Yunxi wished she could withdraw all of her needles, but it was already too late. Just as the needles were about to sink into Luo Zuishan's head, Gu Beiwei's hand peeked out of his sleeve. A small golden throwing knife was hidden in his gentle jade-like hand. It seemed to be held lightly, but it gave off an inexplicable feeling of power. It was as if this throwing knife was an arrow on a fully loaded bow, about to explode at any moment. However, no one expected that there would be someone even faster than this throwing knife, and with even more explosive power. A red-robed man appeared out of thin air, his luxurious red robes fluttering in the wind. His ink-black hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was like that of a celestial being. With a glance in the air, he had already kicked out, sending Luo Zuishan and the black-robed assassin flying at the same time, dodging Han Yunxi's poison needles in the nick of time. The black-robed assassin wasn't someone easy to deal with. Even after falling to the ground, he didn't let go of Luo Zuishan. As soon as he landed, he grabbed Luo Zuishan and turned to flee without hesitation. At the same time, the other black-robed assassins surrounded the red-robed man. At this time, Han Yunxi came to her senses and immediately used her poison needles to help. Pear Blossom Teardrop Rain burst out like a rain of needles, drowning the black-robed assassins and helping the red-robed man out of his predicament. The red-robed man immediately chased after Luo Zuishan and the others, but he didn't forget to glance back and smile at Han Yunxi. This smile made his long and narrow eyes narrow. Although he was wearing a mask, he was still devastatingly beautiful. A red-robed evildoer with a warm smile. Who could it be? Han Yunxi was very sure that it was him, Gu. Although the black-robed assassins were menacing and had extraordinary strength, with Gu chasing after them, Han Yunxi was completely at ease. This guy's martial arts were exceptional and his poison skills were mysterious. He would definitely be able to protect Luo Zuishan. In the face of Han Yunxi's poison needles, the other black-robed assassins didn't linger and quickly fled. This time, Shi Yuba didn't make any sarcastic remarks. He looked at Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei with an uneasy expression. Were these assassins from the same group or two? Why had they come for the crown prince? Why had they kidnapped Luo Zuishan? Was it a personal grudge, or was it related to the Council of Elders consultation? The situation suddenly became somewhat incomprehensible. Would there be more assassins coming? If they did, who would they kidnap? In Old Man's opinion, we should leave first. Once we pass through the mountain in front, we'll reach Medical City. Let's see who dares to be arrogant then. Shi Yuba spoke arrogantly, but he was actually afraid. Han Yunxi refused. Director Luo should be back soon. We'll wait here. If you're afraid, you can leave first. Afraid? What a joke. Old Man is afraid. Old Man. Humph. Shi Yuba was filled with anger. As he spoke, he approached Han Yunxi. Wait, could Han Yunxi wait for Luo Zuishan to return? At this time, Gu had already taken care of the black-robed assassin and rescued Luo Zuishan safely. However, they didn't immediately turn back. Luo Zuishan carefully examined the black-robed assassin's corpse. After a thorough examination, he was very certain that this black-robed assassin was from Northern Li and was a well-trained killer. Gu crossed his arms and leaned against a tree trunk, smiling. Aren't they all human? What's the difference? Their bones are different. Luo Zuishan thought back and forth. He hadn't offended anyone in Northern Li. However, Gu wasn't on the same wavelength as him. Gu smiled and asked, Hey, what do you think of that poison girl? At this time, Luo Zuishan looked up, disdain written all over his face. Not much. Chapter 229. Luo Zuishan looked disdainful, but his heart was filled with astonishment. If he hadn't been kidnapped, he'd probably be asking Han Yunxi, how's that kid Gu doing? He'd watched Gu grow up, so there was probably no one else in the world who understood Gu better than him, right? A woman who could make Gu talk so much couldn't be simple. Moreover, Gu not only called her Poison Lass, but did Han Yunxi a huge favor as well. If not for Gu, Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei would have been sentenced to death by Emperor Tianhui long ago. What do you mean by not much? Gu's tone revealed a rare hint of anxiety. He always did things his own way and was unrestrained. Why did he suddenly care so much about other people's opinions? Seeing this, Luo Zuishan was even more incredulous. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, Kid, do you fancy that girl's poison skills, or her person? The simple-minded Gu spaced out for a second, but quickly gave Luo Zuishan a serious and definite answer. Of course it's her poison skills. What's so good about her poison skills? Is she better than you? I saw her use those poison needles just then, but they were only a so-so. Luo Zuishan was deliberately belittling him. Although he didn't understand assassination weapons, he could tell that the strength and speed of those needles were extraordinary. So. Actually, seriously speaking, they're not that great. Gu smiled. Of course Luo Zuishan didn't believe him, but continued probing. Really? Gu finally caught on and rolled his eyes, his expression indifferent. It's up to you to believe it or not. If you don't, forget it. Humph. Luo Zuishan grew angry. He narrowed his eyes and drew closer to Gu. Stinking brat, you used Old Man's position as director to apply for an Elder's Command Decree from the Council of Elders for the sake of a mere poison-using girl. Do you think that's fun? What do you see in that girl? Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei had only been locked up in the Supreme Court for 2 days before Luo Zuishan, who was far away in Northern Li, was able to rush over with the Elder's token. This speed was all thanks to Gu's help. Luo Zuishan was truly enraged. Not only had Gu told him about Shi Yuba's misdiagnosis, but he had also used his position as a director as a wager to apply for an elder's order to the Council of Elders for a consultation. No. To be more precise, Gu had acted first and reported later. He had first used Luo Zuishan's title as a director as a wager to apply for a consultation elder decree from the Council of Elders. Only then did he inform Luo Zuishan of Shi Yuba's misdiagnosis. As such, Luo Zuishan had no choice but to make an appearance. After all, if Luo Zuishan couldn't prove that Shi Yuba's diagnosis was wrong, then his position as director would be stripped. In reality, Luo Zuishan still hadn't figured out what was going on with Long Tianma's big belly. The reason he was so confident that he could defeat Shi Yuba at the Council of Elders was because Gu had promised to tell him the secret of Long Tianma's big belly as soon as they arrived at Medical City. Although Luo Zuishan believed that Gu was reliable in this kind of major matter, if Gu didn't have other motives and really was tormenting him like this for the sake of a girl, Luo Zuishan would still feel very sad. I took a fancy to her poison skills. Gu still gave the same answer. Luo Zuishan didn't say anything, but his gaze suddenly became sharp, as if it could penetrate everything. He stared at Gu, clearly still not believing him. Helpless, the more he stared, the more brilliant Gu's smile became. I also took a fancy to her in passing, picking out the person he liked. How could this kind of thing be done conveniently? As he spoke, he lazily straightened his body from the tree trunk and walked back the way he came. Han Yunqi would probably be waiting for him to rescue Luo Zuishan and bring him back. He helped that girl again. Why did he like helping her so much? Luo Zuishan looked at his back, thinking back and forth, repeatedly pondering over his words. Suddenly, he came to a realization and asked in surprise, "Boy, she can't be the person you've been looking for all this time, right?" Gu had always been looking for a person, a woman. In the whole world, only Luo Zuishan knew. Gu's footsteps paused for a moment, but he quickly recovered his original speed. What answered Luo Zuishan was a flirtatious and silent back. Gu seemed to be walking casually, but he was actually taking small steps in the air and moving very quickly. By the time Luo Zuishan caught up, they had already returned to the place where the caravan had stopped. Everything in front of him left Luo Zuishan, who was originally anxious to ask questions, dumbstruck, and Gu's expression instantly changed. How could this be? Han Yunqi and Shi Yuba's carriages had all flipped over, and it was a chaotic scene from a fierce battle. Shi Yuba and Gu Beiyue were both injured and had fallen to the side, but Han Yunqi had disappeared. "Where's Han Yunqi?" Gu angrily said, grabbing Gu Beiyue's collar. After you guys left, another group of assassins showed up. These three groups should be from the same group. Their target was Qin Wang Fei, but esteemed Wang Fei was outnumbered, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Gu finally understood and pushed Gu Beiyue away. This old man has been played. This group of assassins had moved in batches, taking Long Tianma and Luo Zuishan in turn. They had scattered their forces and lured the tiger away from the mountain. The third group of assassins is much more powerful than the first two, and they all know how to use poison. Who did that damned girl Han Yunqi offend? The black-clothed man who took her away is definitely a top-level expert. The frightened Shi Yuba couldn't help speaking. The scene just now was as dangerous as it could be. They were all black-clothed masked men, and each of them had strong martial arts and powerful poison techniques. Han Yunqi couldn't deal with them all by herself, and in the end, she was taken away by the black-clothed man with the strongest martial arts. Top-level expert? Gu seemed to have guessed who it was and was very disdainful. That's right, they also know poison techniques. Shi Yuba quickly added. A complicated look flashed in Gu Beiyue's eyes, but he didn't say anything. In the chaos just now, he had seen everything clearly, so he held back and didn't make a move. This group of black-clothed assassins knew poison techniques, but the black-clothed man who took away Han Yunqi didn't know poison techniques. It was a black-clothed man who had mixed in with the black-clothed assassins. Where did they go? Gu angrily looked at Shi Yuba. Shi Yuba didn't know why, but when he met Gu's long and narrow eyes filled with anger, he suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Many years ago, the youth who had been expelled from the medical academy, the foster son of the first elder of the Council of Elders who fed him medicine every day, had the same look in his eyes when he turned around and stepped out of the medical academy's gates. Those long and narrow eyes were as bright as the sun when he smiled. How could they hide such deep hostility? Could this red-robed masked man be him, Gu Qisha? Gu Qisha was only 10 years old when he was expelled from the medical academy. Within a few years, he had established his own sect and founded the Medicine Ghost Valley. For the past few years, he had always been wearing a black cloak and a mask, and no one had ever seen his true face. Even his foster father, the first elder of the medical academy, didn't know what he looked like. Shiyuba was still immersed in his memories and didn't answer. Gu didn't have that much patience and kicked him. Where did they go? Speak. Only the heavens knew how heavy Gu's kick was. Shiyuba spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and couldn't answer. Fortunately, Gu Beiwei answered in time. The northern forest. Without another word, Gu chased after them. He had followed them all the way to ensure Han Yunqi's smooth journey to Medical City. Just which damned bastard had lured him away and ruined his plans. If Luo Zuishan hadn't been kidnapped, he wouldn't have made a move at all. After Gu left, Shiyuba ignored the blood at the corner of his mouth and anxiously looked at Luo Zuishan. You know him? Luo Zuishan sneered inwardly. How could they just know each other? However, he only shook his head and asked Gu Beiwei. Qin Wangfei knows him, right? Gu Beiwei naturally guessed that the person was Gu, but he played dumb and shook his head. This one isn't sure. Gu searched the northern forest for half a day but didn't find any clues. At the same time, Han Yunqi was perched on top of a boulder by the edge of the forest, the last rays of the setting sun casting a long shadow over her back. The black-clothed man stood behind her. His figure was tall and proud. Han Yunqi wasn't short, but she only reached his chest. He was masked and dressed in black, his entire body exuding a mysterious and unfathomable aura. In the fading afterglow of the setting sun, he was like a god of the night descending to the mortal world. He had kidnapped Han Yunqi and had been silent the entire way here. They had just settled down. He was speechless. Han Yunqi was speechless. Her back was to him, and she didn't dare to turn around for a long time. In the beginning, when faced with so many black-clothed men who knew poison, Han Yunqi knew that they were the Sanfrewa Prince Jun Yixie's men. However, when this black-clothed man suddenly appeared and kidnapped her, she began to doubt her own judgment. This guy wasn't Jun Yixie. He had mixed in with Jun Yixie's men and secretly took her away. Who was this guy? What was his goal in kidnapping her? Why hadn't he spoken yet? After hesitating for a long time, Han Yunqi was the first to speak. Those 3 groups of assassins are in cahoots. You're not. You're so sure? The black-clothed man asked indifferently. Jun Yixie first kidnapped Long Tianma, then kidnapped Luo Zuishan. He's just trying to lure. Han Yunqi said, but hesitated. Jun Yixie's kidnapping method couldn't be to lure out Long Feiyi, who was hiding nearby, and lure Long Feiyi away from the mountain. Besides Long Feiyi, who else could make Jun Yixie go to such lengths? Long Tianma was kidnapped. Long Feiyi didn't have to show up, but Luo Zuishan was kidnapped. If Long Feiyi was here, he would definitely show up to save him. Who knew that Long Feiyi wasn't here, but Gu would appear. After confirming that Long Feiyi wasn't here, it would be easy for Jun Yixie to kidnap her or even kill her. After suffering such a big loss last time, Jun Yixie, who had always wanted to rope her in, probably already had the intention to kill her. He must have been waiting for an opportunity to make his move. Had Long Feiyi ever considered this point for her? Han Yunqi realized that her mind had wandered. She took a deep breath. Han Yunqi smiled and didn't continue speaking. Instead, she turned around with a calm expression. Let's not talk nonsense and get straight to the point. What's your goal? Who knew that the black-clothed masked man would actually laugh softly? Who was he? Chapter 230. A smile could always close the distance between them. But even when the person in front of her smiled, he gave off an unapproachable feeling of loneliness and coldness. Han Yunqi mused that some people were just like that. They were born cold and arrogant, forming a world of their own that made them unapproachable. Even if you were standing right in front of them, you'd still feel like they were far away on the horizon. You'd never be able to enter their world. Just like Long Fei. That's right. Right now she was experiencing the same feeling as standing in front of Long Fei. For a moment, Han Yunqi was almost certain that this black-robed man was Long Fei, but she quickly rejected the idea. Tianning's court was in turmoil, Mama Su's matter had been exposed, and Qin Wang Rong had appeared. The situation wasn't looking good, and Long Fei had already abandoned her to avoid arousing suspicion. How could he possibly come to her rescue? If he wanted to save her, he would have done so long ago. Why wait until now? That fellow never liked to drag things out. Even though there was still a trace of disappointment in her heart, Han Yunqi proudly ignored it. She raised her chin and asked cold, "What are you laughing at?" The black-robed man seemed to want to tear off his mask, but his hand twitched before he gave up. He didn't answer Han Yunqi, but said mildly, "Let's go. I'll send you to Medical City." Now Han Yunqi was bewildered. "Just who are you? Why are you taking me to Medical City?" The black-robed man didn't seem to like talking much. His slender finger lightly pressed against his lips, indicating that Han Yunqi didn't need to ask any more questions. He reached out with his other hand, intending to take her hand. Han Yunqi reflexively retreated, her face full of vigilance. The pear-blossom teardrop rain hidden in her sleeve immediately readied for action. A playful look flitted past the black-robed man's eyes. Suddenly, his figure flashed and landed behind Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi immediately turned around, but it was too late. The black-robed man had firmly grasped her hand with the pear-blossom teardrop rain, preventing her from using her concealed weapon. This was her Achilles heel. "Let go!" Han Yunqi shouted angrily. Her other elbow immediately stabbed backward. The poison needle hidden in her elbow protruded out. Unfortunately, the black-clothed man seemed to have known beforehand and easily avoided it. Han Yunqi didn't give up struggling. She stomped on the black-clothed man's foot. Unfortunately, the black-clothed man not only dodged, but also stepped on her foot to pin her down. She had so many poisonous needles hidden on her body, she didn't believe that she couldn't stab this guy with one. She kicked again with her other leg and struck with her other hand. She turned her head and spat out several needles. Even when she tilted her head, poisonous needles could fly out of her neck. She was really going all out. But soon, it was proven that Han Yunqi had underestimated the other party. She had used almost all her skills, but the man behind her had always grabbed her wrist with one hand and dealt with her with the other with ease. He was not injured at all. In the end, Han Yunqi, who had always been calm, almost broke down. She shouted angrily, "Bastard! Let go of me! Who are you? Will you get pregnant if you speak?" However, the black-clothed man didn't make a sound. If this guy hadn't just spoken, she would have thought that he was a mute. How could he be so patient? How could he let her struggle and question him so many times without making a sound? In the end, it was the angry Han Yunqi who calmed down. She sighed deeply, turned her back to him, and didn't say anything. The black-clothed man still didn't say anything, but he stretched out one hand and wrapped it around Han Yunqi's small waist. This hug was so smooth and tight. She didn't know if it was because his hands were too big or because they were too cold, but when those slightly rough hands gently brushed against her clothes, she couldn't help but tremble a little. He pulled her into his arms and turned her to face him. Han Yunqi was a sensible person. Although she was angry, she had already given up struggling in her heart. No matter what this guy's background was, since he wanted to take her to Medical City, then she would go. She would take one step at a time. However, when she turned sideways and inadvertently met the black-clothed man's cold eyes, she actually saw the playfulness in his eyes. So, this guy's actions were actually teasing her? Han Yunqi realized in hindsight. Her beautiful brows suddenly furrowed. She stared at the black-clothed man, wishing that she could kill him with her gaze. Seeing this, the black-clothed man, who was about to leave, suddenly stopped. The playfulness in his eyes deepened. Han Yunqi didn't know if it was her imagination, but there seemed to be a faint smile hidden in his playfulness. She had to admit that when those eyes, which were as deep as the sea and as cold as ice, smiled. They were really beautiful. It was as if the snow had melted and the flowers had bloomed in the warmth of spring. The more Han Yunqi looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. She unconsciously looked more and more seriously. She was very sure that she had seen this guy somewhere before. She thought about it, but she couldn't remember where. The masked man also looked at her. She didn't know if it was because her dazed gaze had affected him or because he was serious. His cold eyes actually warmed up as he quietly looked at her. The two of them held each other as their eyes met. It was silent in all directions. At the peak of the forest on the cliff, the entire world was silent. But suddenly, Han Yunqi suddenly raised her head and fiercely bit down on the black-clothed man's arm. The black-clothed man obviously didn't expect this as he suddenly retracted his warm gaze. Not to mention his eyes, even his entire face became abnormally cold. Han Yunqi bit down on his arm tightly and didn't let go. Fresh blood flowed out, but the man only stared at her and didn't push her away. He didn't even make a sound. This fellow, what kind of person was he? In just a short moment, the blood turned black. Without a doubt, Han Yunqi had poisoned him. But even so, the masked man still didn't move. He withdrew his gaze and silently watched as the black blood flowed out from Han Yunqi's mouth. He didn't have any intention to move. To hide poison in one's mouth, unless one wanted to commit suicide, they would usually hide some ordinary poison. Otherwise, if they accidentally swallowed it or contaminated their mouth, it would be troublesome. Although ordinary poison wasn't strong, but as long as it penetrated deeper into the flesh and blood, the poison wouldn't be too weak. Hence Han Yunqi bit down with all her might, hoping that the poison would penetrate deeper and deeper. This masked man was an expert, so if the poison didn't penetrate deeper, Han Yunqi wouldn't be at ease. Hence, she tried her best to use up all the poison in her mouth before the masked man pushed her away. But who knew that as time slowly trickled by, the masked man still didn't move. Finally, Han Yunqi had used up all the poison in her mouth, but the black-clothed man still didn't move. Could it be that the poison had turned him into a retard? There wasn't any poison in this world which could poison a retard. What was going on? She had obviously succeeded in her plot, but such a silent reaction made the back of Han Yunqi's head feel a chill, and she felt extremely uneasy. She hesitated for a moment and carefully released her mouth. She raised her head and saw the masked man staring at her without moving. That gaze seemed to be deep in thought. This fellow, didn't it hurt? Could it be that the pain had turned him into a retard? If it was in the past, Han Yunqi would have suavely pushed the masked man away and at the same time stomped on him before escaping. But this time, she didn't dare to move. Instead, she carefully said, "I can give you the antidote, as long as you let me go." Finally, the masked man spoke. His voice was as cold as ice. "Han Yunqi, you could have killed me earlier. This isn't the first time." For over 20 years, no one had been able to get so close to him, not to mention injure or kill him. But this woman had done it more than once. Earlier, his life had once again fallen into her hands. He didn't like this feeling, but he had unknowingly fallen into her hands several times. To him who had been cautious at every step since he was young and had set up defenses everywhere, this was undoubtedly handing his life over to her. He was sure that this woman was trustworthy, but was she that trustworthy? The masked man's words confused Han Yunqi. She was about to break free when a white figure suddenly flipped over from afar. The person who came was none other than the fake banished immortal, Tang Li. When Han Yunqi saw Tang Li, she was shocked and immediately blurted out, "Save me." When Tang Li saw the masked man carrying Han Yunqi and the wound on his arm, he was also shocked and blurted out, "Long Fei Yi, you've been bitten?" "Long Fei Yi? Long Fei Yi. It's him?" Han Yunqi was so shocked that her face turned pale. She widened her eyes and stared at Long Fei Yi's masked face in disbelief. At the same time, Long Fei Yi finally retracted his thoughtful gaze and gently pushed Han Yunqi away. Thus, Han Yunqi, who was in a state of extreme shock, fell to the ground with a bang. "Long Fei Yi, you." Han Yunqi couldn't regain her senses. She didn't expect that he would come to save her. She also didn't expect that after saving her, he would still have the leisure to tease her. Was this her dream or Long Fei Ye's dream? Han Yunqi was in a daze. What are you guys doing? Tang Li, who was still in shock, finally spoke. Han Yunqi was speechless. Long Fei Yi ignored her and turned around. He took off his mask and lowered his head to suck out the poisoned blood from his arm. Han Yunqi, you bit him and even poisoned him? You actually… Tang Li didn't know what to say. He really wanted to praise Han Yunqi. In this world, only this woman could torment Long Fei Yi like this. Han Yunqi didn't know that Tang Li was amazed in his heart. She only thought that he was angry. Well, Long Fei Yi came to save her. It was indeed wrong of her to bite Lu Dongbin like a dog, but who told Long Fei Yi to stay silent and not reveal his identity? If she didn't bite him, did he plan to take her to Medical City without saying anything? Did he plan to never reveal his identity? Han Yunqi found that she couldn't see through this guy more and more. Feeling wronged in her heart, Han Yunqi was too lazy to explain. She hurriedly walked to Long Fei Yi and said, "Sit down. I'll use acupuncture to detoxify you. There's too much poison. I can't suck it all out." Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, but when faced with Han Yunqi's direct gaze, his eyes were somewhat evasive. He sat down obediently. At this time, Han Yunqi tactfully didn't ask or say anything. She silently used acupuncture to detoxify him. However, the damn Tang Li didn't know how to save trouble. He watched from the side and couldn't help but ask, "Long Fei Yi, you just took off your mask. Were you playing with her? Playing with a woman? How could Long Fei Yi do such a thing?" Chapter 231. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had a tacit understanding of what kind of shady business Long Fei Yi had just done. Both of them were currently in an awkward situation, so Tang Li's question only made the atmosphere even stranger. Naturally, the taciturn Long Fei Yi wouldn't answer. Han Yunqi lowered her head as she silently applied acupuncture to detoxify Long Fei Yi. Her face was expressionless as she pretended not to hear anything. Tang Li rubbed his chin as he gave the two of them a suspicious look. He seemed to have noticed something amiss and snickered silently to himself. Tang Li had shut his mouth, but his words had already set off perilous waves that couldn't be quelled. She didn't know what Long Fei Ye's current state of mind was, but Han Yunqi's heart had long been turned upside down and thrown into disarray. Why was he playing with her? Did he have nothing better to do? Was he bored? Or was he in a good mood today? But even if he was bored or in a good mood, he still wouldn't do something like this. In Han Yunqi's impression, as well as everyone else's, Tianning's Duke of Qin was nothing but cold and indifferent. Forget joking around, he didn't even know how to smile. Or perhaps, this was another side of Long Fei Yi that few people knew about. She just didn't know about it all this time? In any case, Han Yunqi couldn't find a reason. She quietly mulled things over in her mind until her thoughts wandered as she applied the needles. Abruptly, Long Fei's arm shuddered before he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Ah! It wasn't Long Fei Yi who cried out, but Han Yunqi's. She'd pricked the wrong acupuncture point. "I'm sorry, I know it hurts a lot." With the wrong acupuncture point, the pain of the needle was comparable to a knife stabbing into one's heart. It was unbearable. As a doctor, Han Yunqi knew this best. "I didn't do it on purpose. I know it hurts a lot, but it'll be better soon. Bear with it." She'd always been confident in detoxifying poisons, but this was probably the most flustered she'd ever been in her 2 lifetimes. He didn't seem like a doctor at all. She braced herself and looked over. Long Fei Yi happened to be looking over as well. He didn't cry out in pain, nor did he blame her. He just gave her a cold look before turning his head away. From the side, she could see that he was frowning. The curve of his face was so handsome that it angered both men and gods. One could only imagine how painful it was for him to frown. Han Yunqi really felt guilty. Facing his indifference, she didn't know what to say. She could only silently continue the acupuncture. However, after a while, she was distracted again. Should he question him? "Long Fei Yi, is it fun to play with me like this? Long Fei Yi, you deserve to be bitten. Long Fei Yi, you're already an adult. Aren't you bored? Long Fei Yi, you have to apologize. Otherwise, I won't detoxify you." All kinds of self-righteous questions kept echoing in her mind. If it was any other time, even if she was facing him, she would still dare to question him. However, it was so awkward this time. When she thought of how Long Fei had flirted with her just now, she didn't dare to ask. She even didn't dare to look him in the eye. Han Yunqi was so confused. In this confusion, Han Yunqi made a mistake again. She pricked the wrong acupoint again. This time, blood didn't spurt out. Instead, all the black blood stopped flowing. Han Yunqi actually didn't realize it until Tang Li reminded her. Has the poisoned blood been expelled so quickly? Han Yunqi looked up. Without waiting for Tang Li to answer, she immediately looked down at Long Fei's wound. Only then did she realize that she was ridiculously wrong. Damn it! She despised herself in her heart, but didn't dare to talk nonsense. She buried her head and hurriedly changed the needles. Long Fei didn't move, but his cold and handsome face was much paler. After a while, Han Yunqi finally managed to expel all the poison from Long Fei's arm. She applied medicine and carefully bandaged the wound. Tang Li came over at this time. He rubbed his chin and glanced at Long Fei's wound. He said slowly, "Long Fei, this is your first time being bitten by a woman, right?" At this point, neither of them responded. Tang Li continued casually, "You let her bite you on purpose, right?" As soon as he said that, Han Yunqi suddenly tightened her grip on the bandage. She tightened her grip and the bandage wrapped around the wound. Long Fei groaned heavily and finally turned his head to look over. However, he seemed to want to act as if nothing had happened and directly avoided Han Yunqi. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Tang Li coldly. He asked, "Where's Long Tianma?" After Han Yunqi's group left the Supreme Court, he followed them and secretly protected them. When the black-clothed assassin kidnapped Long Tianma, Tang Li had already secretly chased after him. When Luo Zuishan was kidnapped, he also wanted to send people to track him down. He only gave up when he saw Gu appear. In this consultation, Long Tianma was very important. Luo Zuishan was also very important. However, as long as Han Yunqi was still around, he wouldn't appear for anyone. How could Jun Yixie's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain escape his eyes? When Long Fei asked this, Tang Li remembered that he had rushed over for an urgent matter. He was taken away by Jun Yixie. His mother's poison skills are too powerful. I can't beat him. Tang Li quickly replied. He went to look for Long Tianma. Long Fei was a little surprised. Jun Yixie used the plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain, and Long Fei beat him at his own game. As long as Jun Yixie didn't personally appear, it would be easy for Tang Li to deal with the black-clothed assassins and rescue Long Tianma. But who knew that Jun Yixie, who should have chased Long Fei, didn't chase after him? Instead, he turned around to protect Long Tianma. It had to be admitted that if Long Tianma fell into Jun Yixie's hands, there would be a lot of trouble. This prince underestimated him. Long Fei was a step behind. This made Long Fei very unhappy. This guy's background is mysterious. I investigated for a long time in Northern Li, but I couldn't find anything about him. Tang Li said seriously. Han Yunqi listened silently on the side. She had a rough idea of what was going on. Just as she was about to ask, a black-clothed guard rushed over and reported in a panic. "Your Highness, Jun Yixie sent someone to pass on a message," he said. Although the black-clothed guard was anxious, he stuttered and didn't dare to continue speaking. "Is he seeking death? Hurry up and speak." Tang Li was anxious. The black-clothed guard glanced at Han Yunqi before continuing. "Jun Yixie sent someone to pass on a message. He wants your Highness to exchange esteemed Wang Fei for His Highness the Crown Prince." At this, Long Fei suddenly looked straight at the black-clothed guard. His piercing gaze made the guard shiver uncontrollably, as if he'd committed some heinous crime. Han Yunqi wasn't surprised. Jun Yixie had kidnapped so many people for her sake. The medical academy's consultation had nothing to do with him at all. If she was exchanged for Long Tianma, the medical academy's consultation could still continue. Luo Zuishan could prove that she and Gu Beiwei weren't guilty, so the Duke of Qin's estate wouldn't be implicated, right? Moreover, if news of this reached Emperor Tianhui's ears, Long Fei Yi would be able to cut ties with her and express goodwill towards the emperor. It wasn't that Han Yunqi was looking down on Long Fei Yi, but that a wise man submits to circumstances. A man who tries to be brave isn't a hero. After all, Tianning was still Emperor Tianhui's world, while Long Fei Yi was only a king. Han Yunqi was still trying to figure out the intricacies of the situation when Long Fei Yi asked, "When and where?" 3 days from now, at noon at Shinkong Temple. If you're late. What? To silence. The black-clothed guard's voice trembled. Silence? Kill Tianning's crown prince? Tang Li's face paled a few shades as he looked at Long Fei Yi. He wanted to speak, but stopped himself. Jun Yixia was too insolent, wasn't he? With Long Fei Yi's personality, he'd definitely come to save the woman instead of swapping her out. He'd protect both Han Yunqi and Long Tianma. But this time, Jun Yixia wouldn't have dared to say such words unless he'd made sufficient preparations. Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand in this situation. In fact, it was highly possible that he'd be trapped in a tiger's den with no return. Han Yunqi understood the intricacies of the situation as well. Seeing Long Fei Yi's stern profile, she spoke without hesitation. Go ahead and swap. When the time comes, you guys can leave. I have my own ways to deal with him. But Long Fei Yi's eyes immediately turned cold at her words. He said angrily, Han Yunqi, do you think your lordship came here for nothing? He'd gone to great lengths to save this woman, but she was going to deliver herself to his doorstep. Wouldn't everything he'd done be wasted? What kind of person did she take him for? Would he hand over the woman under his name so easily? Or did she take his act at the justice courts for real? Han Yunqi was rendered speechless by his fierce words. Sensing the change in the atmosphere, Tang Li hastened to smooth things over. Of course you have to go. When the time comes, you two can work together to deal with Jun Yixia. Leave the rest to me. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi tossed him 2 words. I'm not going. What? Tang Li was frightened. After all, once Long Tianma died, there'd be no end to Emperor Tianhui's problems. Han Yunqi gave a start, wondering if she'd heard wrong. But Long Fei Yi's next words left her completely stupefied. He ordered the black-robed guards, go tell Jun Yixia that even if he has the skills to trade Northern Li's lands for her, your lordship won't do the exchange. He didn't need to trade for what he wanted. He'd never hand over what he had. Long Fei Yi turned to leave as soon as he finished speaking, leaving Han Yunqi frozen in place. She didn't know what to do. Who could tell her if those words just now could be considered as overbearing words of love? This man had actually given her the answer to a choice between a country and a woman. But who could tell her why she still felt distant and unfamiliar as she watched his retreating form? It was as if that icy kiss from the past had meant a lot, but it also felt like nothing. Han Yunqi stood there in a daze. Long Fei Yi had already walked far away, but he still turned back to look at her cold voice. Han Yunqi, you're still not leaving? Where are we going? Han Yunqi asked without a second thought. I told you just then. Why aren't you leaving? Long Fei Yi urged impatiently. Just now? He'd said he'd take her to Medical City when he was teasing her. So he hadn't forgotten what happened just then. Han Yunqi was still a little confused, but she couldn't help but smile. There was no need to ask about what happened in the justice courts. No matter what, it was good that he'd come. She quickly caught up to him and walked by his side. Soon enough, Long Fei Yi took her into his arms and flew into the air towards Medical City. 3 days later, Jun Yixia waited for nothing at Shinkong Temple. Chapter 232. Jun Yixia sat cross-legged on the praying mat in front of the Buddha statue, mulling over Long Fei Yi's words. Exchanging Northern Li's empire for a woman, he looked calm, but his clenched fists betrayed him. He might be mad, but Long Fei Yi was even crazier. He assumed that Long Fei Yi would team up with Han Yunqi to kidnap Long Tianma, but that fellow didn't even show up. All of Shinkong Temple's inescapable net had been laid for naught. Today, Jun Yixia sat from noon until sunset. By the time the skies fell, he was certain that Long Fei Yi wouldn't show up. They'd agreed to silence him if he missed the deadline. But what was he supposed to do if he missed the deadline? Junixia had to think it over carefully. If Han Yunqi hadn't taken off his mask in Medicine City and exposed his true face to Long Feiyi, he would have been happier if Long Feiyi didn't show up today. He would have chopped off Long Tianma's head without hesitation and delivered it to Emperor Tianhui so he could bite off Long Feiyi's head. Unfortunately, his identity had already been exposed. Northern Li's Duke of Kong represented the Northern Li imperial clan, so he couldn't help but have misgivings. He had to be on guard against Long Feiyi using his identity to make a fuss. He wasn't of imperial blood, but he was the most favored duke. Plenty of Northern Li's imperial clan members would want to find fault with him. Seeing Junixia rise to his feet, one of his attendants stepped forward. "Master, Long Feiyi wouldn't really care about that woman, would he?" Junixia laughed coldly. "Long Feiyi, does he have a heart?" The attendant was even more confused. "Then he shouldn't. A single lie in exchange for a useful woman's heart." Junixia paused as he spoke, then turned around with a serious expression. "It's worth it." Han Yunqi's poison skills were not only exquisite, but also mysterious. With the help of such a woman, how many surprises would there be? To Junixia, one Han Yunqi was equivalent to a group of poison men that he had raised. Hence, even though Han Yunqi had ruined many of his plans and had even poisoned him, he had never really intended to kill her and still wanted to rope her in. Lying to a woman? The attendants didn't understand. In his impression, his lord had never been close to women. When facing women, let alone lying and coaxing, he wouldn't even greet them. "Master, then, Tianning's crown prince." The attendant was more concerned about this matter. What should he do with Long Tianma now? They couldn't kill him, but they couldn't just let him go. Wouldn't that be too cowardly? His subordinates were alarmed and worried for their master. However, Junixia already had a plan. He said in a low voice, "Bring me the 100 leaves purple jade grass." The attendant grew alarmed at his words and reminded him, "Master, this poison. We still don't have an antidote." His lord wanted to poison Long Tianma before letting him go. He could let him go then, but he had to have a handle on him first. The 100 leaves purple jade grass was a poison that Junixia had named after Junixia because it was a completely new poison that had never been seen before. Junixia had been cultivating new poisons in Medicine City's medicine forest. Although Han Yunqi had interrupted his work, he still had some ingredients on hand. Over the past few months, he'd managed to cultivate 3 new poisons. The poisons had been cultivated, but the antidote was still missing. In other words, there was no cure for these 3 poisons. The 100 leaves purple jade grass's poison wasn't fatal, but it was extremely torturous. It made one's bones ache all over and made them immobile. It's precisely because we don't have an antidote that there's no chance of failure. Junixia laughed coldly as he walked towards the rear courtyard of the monastery. This time, he'd like to see if Han Yunqi had the skills to deal with the 100 leaves purple jade grass. He wanted to make it impossible for Han Yunqi to survive in Tianning and force Long Feiyi to give up on Han Yunqi. In the rear courtyard, Long Tianma was still lying in his carriage, completely unconscious and powerless. His body was covered in thick bedding, so anyone who didn't know better would think he was a normal person sleeping peacefully. Junixia boarded the carriage and only glanced at Long Tianma's face before looking away. Forget about the Tianning crown prince. He didn't even care about the Tianning emperor. In all of Tianning, only Long Feiyi could be considered a hindrance to him. He sat silently on one side until an attendant delivered the 100 leaves purple jade grass. Then he personally lifted Long Tianma's ink-black bedding and revealed Long Tianma's protruding belly. What's going on?" Junixia revealed a rare expression of shock, while the surrounding attendants were caught off guard as well, their faces filled with surprise. A grown man actually had a big belly? Before Junixia could move, the attendants who'd recovered their wits rushed forward to take off Long Tianma's robes. Once they did, the truth was revealed. It really was a big belly, as if he was pregnant. "Master, how is this possible?" The attendants were stunned. Everyone knew that Tianning's crown prince had been ill for a long time. As for what illness he was suffering from, there were all sorts of different theories. No one knew the truth. This time, Luo Zuishan had beaten the drums in the justice courts to lodge a complaint, so everyone knew about it. Unfortunately, they still didn't publicize the Crown Prince's relapse. Junixia only knew about the medical academy's consultation, but he didn't know about Long Tianma's illness. He didn't care either. Ascites. This was Junixie's first reaction. Medicine and poisons were one family, and he was an expert in poisons. Naturally, he knew quite a bit about medicine as well. Long Tianma was on his way to the medical academy while Qin Wangrong was still doing his best to track down Long Tianma's whereabouts. Luo Zuishan, Shi Yuba, and Gu Beiwe had already arrived at the medical academy, but Gu was nowhere to be found. Long Tianma and Han Yunqi were both missing, so the consultation naturally couldn't proceed. Emperor Tianhui had spread word that the medical academy had to send Gu Beiwe back to Tianning's capital city in 5 days. Long Tianma and Han Yunqi's disappearance had to be explained to Tianning as well. The Council of Elders didn't express any opinions, but sent out plenty of men to search for the missing men. Everyone was waiting for news. Han Yunqi didn't go to the medical academy immediately after arriving in Medical City, but was taken to an inn by Long Fei Yi. It was the best cloud auspicious inn in Medical City, the Sky Room one. From the window of the room, one could see the main doors of the medical academy. Currently, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi were standing side by side in front of the window. Has there been no news from Junixie's side? Han Yunqi was rather worried. Although there was no proof that Long Tianma hadn't been silenced, who knew if Junixie would let him go? One more day without news from Long Tianma means you can rest for one more day. What's the rush? Long Fei Yi retorted. They hadn't stopped the entire way here, but the number of words they'd exchanged could be counted on one hand. There didn't seem to be anything more or less between them. However, when he hugged her and held her hand, his strength seemed to be a lot tighter than before. She also felt a lot more natural and was no longer awkward. Didn't His Majesty only give Medical City 5 days' time? Han Yunqi asked next. Long Fei Yi arched a brow at her with a cold smile. Aren't you overestimating Tianhui too much? The Medical Academy represented Medical City. Emperor Tianhui wouldn't be stupid enough to oppose Medical City for the sake of a deposed crown prince. Han Yunqi wasn't clear on the strength of Cloud Realm Continent's powers, but she was more concerned about Long Tianma's condition. Would he change after 5 days? After some hesitation, she said, I'd better not rest. Let's go to the medical academy. I have to see Gu Beiwe. Luo Zuishan wouldn't give her any answers, so she had to discuss things with Gu Beiwe first. Hearing this, Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with displeasure. Coldly, he said, I have something to do tonight, so I won't be going. What is it? Han Yunqi was puzzled. Was there anything more important than a consultation in Medical City? But Long Fei Yi didn't answer her, but called for dinner instead. Chapter 233. The table was filled with delicacies and wine. Those who didn't know better would have thought that Long Fei Yi was entertaining someone in this room. Han Yunqi scanned the table of dishes and realized that many of them were dishes that she had never seen before. They looked, smelled, and tasted very tempting. However, there were at least 20 plates of dishes. Wasn't it a little too exaggerated for 2 people to eat? Is there anyone else coming? Tang Li? She asked suspiciously. No. Long Fei Yi was really a man of few words. All right, this guy had been pampered since he was young. He was very particular about his food and clothing. Although he was out, he couldn't lower himself for a meal. Han Yunqi ignored this question and sat down opposite him. She ate casually and asked as she ate, Is there anything else tonight? Will it take a long time? It had been a few days, and there was no news from Long Tianma or her. Gu Beiwe would be worried, especially about Long Tianma's condition. He had to treat it carefully. After all, she and Gu Beiwe had made this trip for no other reason than to clear their names. Long Fei Yi looked up and glanced at the dishes in her bowl. He seemed a little unhappy, but he didn't show it. He rolled up his sleeves elegantly and poured wine casually. He didn't look like he had anything to do tonight. He only replied to Han Yunqi with 2 words, Eat. Phew. The anxious Han Yunqi secretly sighed in her heart. He had time to enjoy delicious food and wine, but she didn't have time to accompany him. If it's not urgent, I'll go to the medical school first. She was very serious. She ate a few mouthfuls of food, put down her bowl and chopsticks, and stood up. Long Fei Ye's hand that was holding the wine cup suddenly tightened. If the porcelain cup wasn't hard enough, it would have cracked. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi didn't notice his hand. I'm leaving. As she spoke, she turned around and left. Long Fei stared coldly at her retreating form, neither more nor less. Just as Han Yunqi was about to open the door, he opened his mouth. Han Yunqi, how much do you know about the medical academy? As soon as he said this, Han Yunqi immediately turned around. This was probably the first time that Long Fei had talked to her about medical school. Could it be that this guy had something to do with the medical school? Since this guy who cherished his words as if they were gold had spoken, there must be something going on. Was he talking to her about the medical school because of Madame Tianxin? Otherwise, he had no reason to talk to her. She had always been investigating Madame Tianxin's background. She wanted to know why Madame Tianxin had concealed her identity and married Hong Kongan while pregnant. She wanted to know whether Madame Tianxin's difficult labor was an accident or if someone had plotted to kill her. She also wanted to know who her biological father was. From what she knew, Hong Kongan only had one clue. Madame Tianxin was related to the medical school and had the ability to get a director position for Hong Kongan. This matter was much more important than meeting Gu Beiyue. Not much. What do you want to say? Han Yunqi walked back and stood in front of Long Fei, but Long Fei was still as calm as ever. He wasn't anxious at all. Have you heard of the medical school's poison sect? Long Fei asked. As expected, when this guy didn't talk about it, it was shocking. Medical school and poison sect, how could these two words be related? Han Yunqi was very surprised. Like a humble child, she quickly sat down and asked anxiously, how can there be a poison sect? Wasn't the medical school's only branch the medical sect? Didn't they only teach medical skills and train doctors to cure illnesses and save lives? Seeing Han Yunqi sit back down, Long Fei Ye's lips curved into a satisfied smile. The medical school once had two major sects, the medical sect and the poison sect. Their purpose was to save lives and do good deeds. Later on, the poison sect was destroyed and became a taboo in the medical school. Fewer and fewer people knew about it. Han Yunqi couldn't believe it. She'd always known that medicine and poison are one family, but never expected it to be true in the medical school. Why was it destroyed? Han Yunqi asked hastily. Someone who's good at treating poisons must also be good at using poisons, Long Fei said mildly. Han Yunqi was very familiar with these words. Once upon a time, Emperor Tianhui had taken note of her because of them. In the end, poison was a dangerous thing. Even if you didn't have the heart to use poison, others still wouldn't tolerate you. However, how could it be so easy to annihilate a sect? Since it was a sect, it had to have inviolable authority and powerful branches. For example, Medical City and Medicine City were both cities and sections. That was why even the imperial powers and empires feared them. How was the poison sect destroyed? Han Yunqi was very curious. It wasn't clear whether Long Fei really didn't know, or if he was faking it. In any case, he shook his head. Her curiosity was piqued, but it couldn't be satisfied. It was truly annoying. Han Yunqi pursed her lips and asked probingly, "Why are you telling me all this?" She'd lied and claimed that Lady Tianxin had taught her poison skills. This guy wouldn't take it seriously and track her down to the medical school's poison sect, right? Faced with Han Yunqi's question, Long Fei fell silent. Why did he tell her all this? It seemed he didn't have any ulterior motives other than chatting and not letting her leave. Just what is it? Han Yunqi asked curiously. Long Fei avoided her gaze and hesitated before saying, "There's a poison storehouse in the poison sect's forbidden grounds in Medical City. It's the most complete storehouse in the world. Perhaps you can find clues to unraveling the perplexing dreams there." That should be a reasonable explanation, right? Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi's bright eyes dimmed at these words. Perplexing butterfly illusion was a poison that Han Yunshi had always carried with her. It was also the most troublesome poison that Han Yunshi had ever encountered. Even now, she hadn't been able to determine whether it was poisonous. After the last upgrade of the detoxification system, many new poisonous plants had grown out of the poison pool it had swallowed from Medicine City. Moreover, the detoxification system had also developed its own antidote. This was a huge leap forward for the detoxification system. Unfortunately, it wasn't of any help in unraveling the perplexing butterfly illusion. That small bottle of poison was just like its name, perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunshi took out the perplexing butterfly illusion from her medical pouch and sighed inwardly. She should have guessed that this guy wouldn't be so nice as to tell her about Lady Tianxin so frankly. Fine, she should have guessed that he wouldn't appear just to save her this time. He'd come from Medical City's poison storehouse. When would the relationship between her and this man become a little more pure? Was it because it wasn't pure that she always felt a sense of unfamiliarity when she was by his side? For a moment, Han Yunshi lost interest in the secrets of Medical City's poison sect. She stood up and smiled faintly. Your Highness, no matter how urgent the matter of the perplexing butterfly illusion is, it'll have to wait until Gu Beiwei and I have cleared our names. I have to make a trip to the medical academy. Excuse me. Long Fei hadn't expected Han Yunshi to react this way. He asked unhappily, "It's the middle of the night. What's so urgent?" Han Yunshi was delighted, and her smile grew even brighter. Your Highness, of course it's urgent. This concubine has to discuss the Crown Prince's condition with Imperial Physician Gu to prevent any possibility of his illness developing. If that happens and there's trouble during the consultation, how can this concubine go to the poison storehouse with you with a guilty body? Long Fei's expression changed when he heard this. It was rare to see him lose control and panic. However, he hesitated to speak, his handsome face turning cold. He didn't say anything, so she took his silence as a tacit agreement. I'm leaving. Han Yunshi elegantly turned to leave. The medical academy isn't a place you can enter as you please. Long Fei finally spoke up. This concubine can enter as long as I tell you my name. Your Highness doesn't need to wait for this concubine to return. Han Yunshi didn't turn back. Her words meant that she wouldn't be returning to the inn after revealing her whereabouts. This prince said that you're not allowed to leave because I have something to do tonight, Long Fei said in a low voice. What is it? Please speak, Your Highness. Han Yunshi finally turned around. What is it? What is it? Long Fei's frosty expression turned even colder, but he didn't reply for a long time. Your Highness, please speak. Han Yunshi took a few steps forward and asked seriously. Although she was still angry, she still took his business seriously. However, Long Fei just stared at her without saying a word. What does this guy want? Is he playing with me? If it's not something important, this concubine. Unexpectedly, before Han Yunshi could finish speaking, Long Fei interrupted her. Yes, serve me in bed tonight. What? Han Yunshi didn't even have time to close her mouth. She was so shocked that she froze on the spot, flabbergasted and unmoving. Tonight, there's something. Serve him in bed tonight. Han Yunshi didn't know how long it took her to digest Long Fei's words. In any case, when she came back to her senses, Long Fei was still sitting in front of her, looking at her coldly. She tried very hard to move the corners of her mouth, trying to make herself smile. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't smile. She could only ask stiffly, Your Highness, this joke isn't funny at all. Does this prince look like he's joking with you? After Long Fei finished speaking, he stood up. Looking at his proud and tall figure, Han Yunshi still felt oppressed even though they were 5 or 6 steps away. Your Highness, you really know how to joke? Han Yunshi unconsciously took a few steps back. Long Fei raised his eyebrows and asked, You still want to leave? Your Highness, this concubine just happened to be unlucky these few days. It's not convenient for me to serve you in bed. How about? Han Yunshi herself felt that this excuse was very lame. Very soon, Long Fei cut him off. Then you can keep watch. Keep watch. This was the job of a maidservant or concubine. She had to guard under the bed and accompany him in bed at the door. She was the official consort. How could she do such a thing? At this moment, Han Yunqi didn't care so much. As long as it wasn't serving him in bed, she could accept it. Her wildly thumping heart finally slowed down. Han Yunqi also calmed down. What was this man trying to do? Was he deliberately looking for trouble? This didn't seem like his style at all. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere seemed to be less tense. Han Yunqi also calmed down. She gathered her courage and said very seriously and sincerely, "Long Fei, if you really don't have anything important to say, then let me go. I want to go see Luo Zuishan with Gu Beiwei." Unexpectedly, Long Fei's icy expression didn't change. He threw her a sentence. "This prince is sleepy. You can keep watch under the bed tonight." Chapter 234. It was late at night. Next to the bed was a quilt spread out on the floor. Han Yunqi hugged a pillow as she sat cross-legged with her back against the bed. When she heard the whistling of the wind outside, she really felt like she was in a moonless, windy place. There was only a small oil lamp in the room. The room was dark and silent. Han Yunqi knew that she couldn't leave tonight. She was just glad that the guy behind her didn't go overboard and let her keep watch at the door. She thought about it and couldn't figure out how she had offended Long Fei. Why did he have to do this to her? Why was he forcing her to stay? Why? What was going on with him tonight? Under such circumstances, Han Yunqi couldn't fall asleep. After an hour, she finally couldn't help but ask, "Hey, are you asleep?" There was no response for a long time. Han Yunqi said again, "Hey, let's talk." In her memory, they had never had a good chat before. They had never even been so quiet together. There was still no response. Could it be that he was asleep? On the bed, Long Fei hadn't even taken off his outer robes. His hands were behind his head as he lay on the bed, his long legs propped up. His deep eyes shone with a cold light in the darkness, sharp and clear. He stared at the top of his head and seemed to be thinking about something. He was full of energy. "Hey, what's the matter with you tonight? Can we talk nicely?" Han Yunqi asked again. At this moment, Long Fei glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. But it was just a glance. He quickly looked away expressionlessly. As long as he was sure that this woman couldn't leave, he didn't have to bother with her. He had a lot of things to think about. Han Yunqi didn't want to keep watch for the whole night. Since she was going to stay, she should seize the opportunity to get closer to this guy. How do you think Jun Yixie will deal with Long Tianma? What's Jun Yixie's background? Why does the northernly emperor dote on him so much? Right? Why do you think Gu is investigating me? Rosemary, is it from the Tang sect? Han Yunqi tried very hard to find a topic that could pique Long Fei's interest. Unfortunately, there was no response. All right. Han Yunqi fell silent as well. Who knew that after a moment of silence, she would suddenly turn around? She hadn't slept because she was worried about bumping into Long Fei, but instead saw him propping up his head with one hand as he slept on his side. His black robes blended into the darkness of the night, making his chiseled features seem even colder and more mysterious. He gave off a feeling that he couldn't be profaned. It turned out that he looked so quiet with his eyes closed. So this was how he looked when he was asleep. It was as if the whole world had fallen asleep with him. Han Yunqi's breathing unconsciously lightened as she stared blankly. She wasn't sure if it was because they were too close, but she felt like she was dreaming in the middle of the night and turning her head to see the person next to her. "Hey," she quietly probed. After waiting for a long time, she saw that Long Fei didn't respond. Like a thief, she carefully moved closer to him and looked at his features. In the darkness, she could even see that his eyelashes were very long. She had the urge to reach out and touch them. Is he really asleep? She muttered to herself and moved back a little. She quietly leaned on the edge of the bed and looked at him. As she looked, her lips unconsciously curled. However, it didn't take long for her smile to fade away. It was replaced by a frown and a look of resentment. How much did it take to fall in love with someone and be so worried about personal gains and losses? How many out of 10 could there be? Long Fei, Is there anyone in this world that you can treat with sincerity without any ulterior motives? Long Fei, do you know what love is? Han Yunqi asked faintly. She then turned around and sat back down. Forget it. Let's sleep. At this moment, Long Fei slowly opened his eyes. His deep eyes were filled with complex emotions. The next morning, Han Yunqi woke up in a daze and found that she was sleeping on the bed. Long Fei was leaning on the rocking chair by the window, opening the secret letter. When did she fall asleep? When did this guy wake up? How did she end up on the bed? Seeing Long Fei looking over, Han Yunqi pursed her lips. Morning. Long Fei just nodded. The moment he opened his mouth, he gave her a piece of explosive news. Long Tianma was sent to the medical school. Really? Han Yunqi was so shocked that she almost fell. When did this happen? Last night. I personally went over and confirmed that it was him. Long Fei answered truthfully. As soon as he said this, Han Yunqi was shocked again. Didn't you fall asleep last night? Long Fei was unperturbed. It was as if he was talking about the weather. Who told you that I fell asleep? What did he mean by this? Could it be that he knew everything she did and said last night? He pretended to be asleep? Long Fei, you're actually a bastard. Han Yunqi's originally cold face instantly turned red. She hurriedly avoided Long Fei's gaze and got off the bed. I'm going to the medical school. Her clothes and hair were all messy. She didn't care about them and directly rushed out. Long Fei stopped her in time. Long Tianma's stomach is gone. What? Han Yunqi exclaimed. Her red cheeks turned pale. His stomach was gone? Was it cured, or was it diseased? If it was cured, and there were no symptoms left for consultation, Shiyuba could say that it was the effect of his treatment. If it was diseased, then how confident was Luo Zuishan? She had never fought a battle that she wasn't sure of. This was the first time she didn't know anything about the patient's condition. Seeing Han Yunqi's anxious look, Long Fei said lightly, It's very likely that Junixia did something. Be careful. I will always be in Medical City. After he finished speaking, he left before Han Yunqi. He would always be in Medical City, so she didn't have to be afraid. The anxious Han Yunqi didn't realize how rare Long Fei's words were. She also left in a hurry. At this time, there was another person who was even more anxious than Han Yunqi. It was none other than Luo Zuishan, who was previously full of confidence. Gu had promised him that he would tell him the truth about Long Tianma's big belly as soon as he arrived at the medical school, and that he would definitely help him defeat Shi Yuba. But now, Long Tianma's disease had changed. Since the middle of the night last night, he had been looking for Gu like a madman. Finally, this morning, he found him on the roof of his courtyard. Luo Zuishan climbed up the ladder and personally pulled Gu down. Stinking brat, old man's decades of reputation is about to be completely destroyed in your hands, and you're still sleeping. Gu let him pull him until he was about to fall. Then, he turned over and flew down. Despite landing on the ground, Gu Qishao's face was still drowsy. He stretched lazily and said, It's just the title of director. If you like, I'll kill the Medical Academy's old academy head in the future, and you'll be the academy head. These words shocked Luo Zuishan so much that he hurriedly stepped forward to cover his mouth. Ancestor, please spare my old bones, okay? Okay, Gu answered happily, but a gloomy coldness flashed across his lips, as if he was full of hatred for the medical school. What do you think we should do now? Long Tianma's disease has changed, and his stomach is gone. Hurry up and take a look. How could Luo Zuishan not be worried? If Gu couldn't understand the disease, he would be done for in the consultation. That person must be a fake. Shi Yuba didn't do anything, so his stomach can't be gone. Gu was very sure. He didn't care whether Long Tianma came or not. What he cared about was where Han Yunqi was. They were both kidnapped, and since Long Tianma was sent here, he should at least send Han Yunqi here too. How can you be sure it's a fake? Stinking brat. What's going on with Long Tianma's stomach? What did Shi Yuba do? Tell me, Luo Zuishan urged. Gu impatiently glanced at him, too lazy to answer. Just as he was about to leave, Luo Zuishan immediately grabbed him and said sternly, Cheer, if you don't tell me, do you think I won't tell the head elder that you're back? Gu suddenly narrowed his eyes, a dangerous expression on his face. You wouldn't dare. What's going on? Are you going to tell me or not? Luo Zuishan was so angry that his beard was about to catch fire. At this time, the voice of a medical apprentice came from outside the courtyard. Luo Zuishan was still holding on to Gu tightly. Chapter 235. As soon as he heard that the elders had arrived, Qinhuang Rong was the first to rise and greet them. If these elders were to be placed in the empire, they would be first-rank officials. They were one level lower than the king, who was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Han Yunxi smiled coldly in her heart. Long Fei was right after all. Emperor Tianhui still didn't have the power to threaten Medical City. Long Tianma's disappearance had left Emperor Tianhui furious, demanding an explanation from Medical City. Now that Long Tianma had been sent back for no reason, the Medical Academy hadn't given them any explanation. Instead, the proud Qinhuang Rong had lowered himself first. But after careful consideration, it wasn't that Qinhuang Rong lacked backbone. After all, Medical City's power was truly frightening. The three great clans of the Medical Academy and Medicine City controlled all of Cloud Realm Continent's medical industry. They had the power to decide the life and death of any doctor. In other words, these two powers controlled the lives of all the people in the world. A single illness could claim a person's life, whether it was a lofty emperor or a lowly slave. A single plague could destroy a battalion of soldiers, a city, or even a country. If the three great empires of Cloud Realm Continent could win over Medical City and Medicine City, they'd surpass the other empires and become the true overlords of Cloud Realm Continent. From another perspective, the consequences of offending Medical City and Medicine City were easy to imagine. Of the 5 elders of the Medical Academy, only 3 had come this time. In Han Yunxi's impression, elders were usually old men with white hair and ruddy complexions. They had the air of a transcendent being, but of the 3 people who came in, 2 were men and 1 was a woman. Only one of them was an old man, while the other 2 could only be considered middle-aged. The old man had a white beard and a white beard, his features benevolent, like an amiable old immortal. The middle-aged man had a stern expression and didn't smile at all. The middle-aged woman was dressed smartly and had good looks. It was obvious at a glance that she was a formidable woman. Why are their elders even younger than the directors? Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. That old man is 3rd Elder Shan Jueming, one of the 3 sage doctors of the Medical Academy. The other 2 are 4th Elder Li Tianxi, a member of the medical primogeniture like the 2 directors. The other is 5th Elder Lady Lianxin. When Gu Beiyue finished his introduction, he lowered his voice even more. Madame Lianxin is a godly doctor. In the Medical Academy, there were 2 major systems. One was the administrative management system, which consisted of directors, council of elders, vice deans, and academy deans. Different ranks held different levels of power in the Medical Academy. The second was the medical skill hierarchy, which was the basis of all of Cloud Realm Continent's medical community. From low to high, there were 9 ranks: medical apprentice, medical scholar, medical doctor, medical grand doctor, divine doctor, medical ancestor, medical sage, immortal doctor, and sovereign doctor. Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba were both medical ancestor-level figures. They were both directors and belonged to the management. Gu Beiyue's medical skills were at the level of a divine doctor, but he had yet to enter a medical school. Generally speaking, those who were skilled in medicine also had high authority. However, there was actually an elder at the level of a godly doctor in the Elders Guild. It seemed that the Medical Academy was not a place where strength was the only thing that mattered. This Lady Lianxin should be an exception. Looking at Lady Lianxin, Han Yunxi couldn't help but think of Han Kongan. Han Kongan's medical skills were at the level of a godly doctor, but he was also a director. This was the exception that Lady Tianxin had given him. Just what kind of exceptions were allowed in the Medical Academy's administrative system? Why was she able to enter the Council of Elders? Han Yunxi asked hastily. I'm not sure about that. I only know that she's the daughter of Medicine City's Mu clan, Gu Beiwei replied honestly. Han Yunqi was lost in thought. The Long Fei Yi had relied on Medicine City's Wang clan to find out much about the medical academy. It looked like the higher-ups of the medical academy still gave face to the three great clans of Medicine City. Aside from the three great clans of Medicine City, what other powers would the medical academy give face to? Could it be that Lady Tianxin came from Medicine City as well? Han Yunqi was lost in her thoughts when Lady Lianxin looked over. You're Lady Tianxin and Han Kongan's daughter? Han Yunqi was surprised. That's this junior. Fifth elder knows my mother? But Lady Lianxin was especially arrogant. I've only heard of her. She had no intention of continuing the topic, but simply went straight to the point. She explained the details of the consultation in a concise and comprehensive manner. This was a public consultation held in the consultation hall of the Council of Elders. The three elders would be in charge of the consultation, while Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba could only watch from the sidelines. If they had any doubts, they could raise them for discussion after the consultation concluded. Although Lady Lianxin was the lowest-ranked elder, she seemed to be the one in charge. The other two elders hadn't opened their mouths since entering the room. Tianning's crown prince is already in the consultation hall. Everyone, please. Lady Lianxin rose to her feet as soon as she finished speaking. The other two elders and Qin Wang Rong rose at the same time, but no one else seemed to have any intention of leaving. Everyone knew that Long Tianma's stomach was gone. Han Yunqi had been discussing the matter with Gu Beiwei for a long time. She had no clue about Long Tianma's relapse to begin with. Now that they hadn't seen him or felt his pulse, they had no idea where to start. The two of them stared at Luo Zuishan, hoping to see the same self-confidence on his face. Unfortunately, Luo Zuishan wasn't his usual confident self. Instead, he was knitting his brows with a heavy heart. Shi Yuba, on the other hand, had his head bowed. His entire person seemed to have dimmed considerably. Director Shi, let's go, Qin Wang Rong urged in a low voice. He could tell that Shi Yuba was uneasy. Last night, he and Shi Yuba had gone to see Long Tianma's stomach. He'd asked him again and again about the state of the illness, whether it was cured or diseased. Shi Yuba hadn't given him a direct answer. Shi Yuba glanced at Qin Wang Rong as if he wanted to say something, but Qin Wang Rong didn't object and held back. The three elders and Qin Wang Rong remained standing while the others remained seated. The room was silent as the atmosphere suddenly turned strange. What, do the two directors have something else to say? Lady Lianxin asked with a frown. Luo Zuishan was about to speak when Shi Yuba spoke up at the same time. Fifth elder. As soon as the others spoke, they all fell silent. Just what's going on? Lady Lianxin didn't have much patience, so the other two elders sat back down. Shi Yuba looked at Luo Zuishan, and Luo Zuishan looked at Shi Yuba. Both of them had ulterior motives and didn't speak for a long time. Director Luo, you were the one who proposed the consultation. If you have something to say it first, Lady Lianxin ordered. Luo Zuishan's heart was filled with grievances. He hadn't proposed the consultation, okay? He'd been forced. Gu had said that Long Tianma was fake, so Long Tianma had to be fake. With a fake Long Tianma for a consultation, and a public one at that, only the heavens knew what kind of trouble this matter would cause. No matter what kind of trouble it caused, not to mention the matter of the Gu, even if it was a public consultation, the medical school's reputation might be damaged. As the person who proposed the consultation, he couldn't escape responsibility. Han Yunqi saw Luo Zuishan's hesitant appearance, and her heart grew cold. It seemed that Long Tianma's illness was out of Luo Zuishan's control. Shi Yuba was going to win. Luo Zuishan. Lady Lianxin was enraged. She was a full 30 years younger than Luo Zuishan and had inferior medical skills, but her status was still there. Her anger still intimidated Luo Zuishan. Elders, let's postpone the consultation. I suspect that Tianning's crown prince is a fake. Luo Zuishan finally spoke up. Everyone was stunned by his words, but Qin Wang Rong was the most shocked. He grew anxious. What's going on? What right do you have to say that? Han Yunqi looked at Gu Beiwei in disbelief. Gu Beiwei was also looking at her. making the two of them even more confused. Luo Zuishan, what do you mean by those words? Third elder finally spoke up. His stomach, it's just that judging from the crown prince's condition, it's impossible for his stomach to go down in a few days, Luo Zuishan explained without much confidence. As long as he told them about the goo, Third elder would definitely believe him. But he couldn't say it. For one thing, the real Long Tianma wasn't here, so he had no proof. For another, he didn't dare say it in public. Although he didn't have much confidence, Luo Zuishan's explanation was still acceptable. A fake? Han Yunxi finally began to think things over. Long Fei Yi had warned her that Junixia would do something to the Long Tianma. Perhaps Junixia hadn't done anything to the real thing, but sent over a fake instead. As Old Man sees it, whether or not the Crown Prince's stomach can go down in such a short time is a question we should discuss during the consultation, Third Elder said as he glanced at Shiyuba. Logically speaking, Shiyuba should have jumped out to refute Luo Zuishan's words. He had more right to speak about the Long Tianma's stomach, but Shiyuba was very quiet right now. Unlike his calm exterior, his heart had long been restless. Why was Luo Zuishan so certain that the Long Tianma he'd sent over was a fake? Did he know he'd planted goo? Impossible. Luo Zuishan knew about the goo arts, but he definitely didn't know how to use them, nor could he tell. He'd only learned a bit of them by chance. Seeing Shiyuba's silence, Third Elder lost his patience. Someone come, immediately arrange for a consultation. At these words, Shiyuba couldn't sit still any longer. Hold it. I also suspect that the Tianning Crown Prince sent over is a fake. Director Luo's words are reasonable. There's no way the Tianning Crown Prince's stomach could go down in such a short time. Goo could only be dispelled by experts in the field of goo. Aside from himself, no one else could dispel the goo arts he'd planted. If he wanted to believe that a goo arts expert still existed in this world, he might as well believe that the Long Tianma lying in the consultation hall right now was an imposter. How could he have any chance of winning against a fake crown prince? Heaven knows if Han Yunxi and the rest were putting on a show to get an imposter to come in for the consultation. Shiyuba's words shocked the crowd even more. Could it be that the Long Tianma really was a fake? How could it be a fake? That's clearly a moer. Qin Wangrong didn't believe it. For the sake of caution, why don't we postpone the consultation? Shiyuba suggested. It was rare for him to be on the same side as Luo Zuishan. How do we test whether it's real or fake? Han Yunxi murmured. Gu Beiwei could only shake his head. Whether it was real or fake, this matter was completely beyond anyone's control. Should they postpone it or not? Was it real or fake? While everyone was exchanging glances in the silent room, a medical apprentice ran in to report, Third Elder, Tianning's Crown Prince has woken up. The unconscious Long Tianma had finally woken up. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.